The white and the green are going to come out at exactly the same time. 2.5 miles left of racing to go. Tanner Watkins picks up the pace then. One more lap to go in the 2020 iRacing Indianapolis 500 down in towards turn number 1. They come for the first time and in towards turn number 2. But a final time in this motor race. Has Brandon Trano got the draft? Oh my word, he has. He goes down to the inside, in towards turn number 3. Trano to the race lead, and Tanner Watkins trying to go alongside him in towards turn 3, but it's not going to happen. Brandon Trano is 2 corners away from making iRacing Indy 500 history, but it's going to be another photo finish once again here. Look at the weaving, look at the dancing going on. Oh my word, Watkins spun around. Trano is going to become the first ever 2-time winner of the iRacing Indianapolis 500. Brandon Trano won in 2019. Brandon Trano with a pass the last lap down in towards turn number 3 gets his second victory in a row, and he has now got himself into iRacing sim racing immortality.
The greatest spectacle in racing all started with 2.5 miles of brick and a victory for Ray Haroon in innovative fashion. More than 110 years later, just a yard of those bricks remain, but it's the most important yard of bricks you will ever find. A venue steeped in tradition and a century of history has found itself writing a new chapter here on the iRacing service. It started back in 2010, part of the inaugural iRacing World Tour, and the first time drivers from across the globe could experience the thrill of duking it out wheel to wheel here at the Brickyard. 12 years later, and the landscape of sim racing has completely changed. Last year, it was Brandon Trano and Team RLL immortalizing themselves in the iRacing history books, becoming the first multi-time winner at the virtual IMS. The week-long qualifying grind came to an end last night, and it's now time for 33 cars to get locked and loaded for 200 laps of action in the 2021 iRacing Indy 500. Delighted you can join us here live on RaceSpotTV. My name is Arjuna Kankipati, and I'm delighted to be joined by two commentators with World Championship experience. Evan Pasoko and Justin Prince, voices of the eNASCAR Coca-Cola Series, join me today. Live timing and scoring powered by our friends at timing71.org. Visit them by following the link at racespot.wtf/Indy to follow along with their world-class data analysis tools. TV cameras, as always, designed by Istvan Ballo and TrackCams22.com, with some additional car cameras provided to us by RaceSpot's own Tyler Maxson. Evan, this is such a historic event. I go on record pretty much all the time saying this is the most special of all the special events. It started back in 2010. There is a 5-day qualifying grind where engineering ability has to come into the mix as well. We whittled down 1,100 drivers to just the fastest 33.
And the iRacing special event calendar continues to grow, and we were talking about this just a few moments ago pre-race. Nothing will top the iRacing Indianapolis 500, and certainly excited to be on the call alongside both you and Justin this afternoon on RaceSpotTV. Don't get it wrong, though. This is far more than just a week-long grind. It's going to be a marathon tonight as well. You talk about how we've whittled this down to the 33 fastest drivers on the sim. There's only going to be a fraction of those 33 with a chance to win it all in about 190 laps from now. At the start, it's an even playing field. You have to survive a fickle IMS that does not give breaks lightly.
And sometimes IMS chooses who will win. It's not always up to you. It can come down to dramatic fashion. Here are the previous winners and pole sitters. Only one two-time champion, and Brandon Traynor looks to become even further entrenched in the iRacing history books with a third consecutive victory here today. He'll be lining up on the outside of the front row. But take a look at this pole position chart as well, Justin. You've got someone like John Gorlinski all the way back in 2010, an eNASCAR Coca-Cola driver today as well. Fastest driver across 4 laps then. Multiple drivers have been able to repeat their pole position success. The likes of Young O, Brandon Traynor, and Mitch McCracken. No driver has converted pole to victory yet so far.
And it's so difficult to win this race, keep in mind, in the first place. You've seen that with the multiple different winners, like Brody Kostecki in 2013 coming away with victory, Christopher German in 2017, Joshua Chin in 2018. And even when you account for Brandon Traynor, 2019, it was a photo finish. 2020, a last lap pass. It is not easy to win here at Indianapolis in this race. It takes a lot of skill. It takes a lot of talent. And it takes a lot of strategy to get yourself in the proper track position to put yourself on that winner's list. And it's been that case for many of the editions of the Indianapolis 500 on iRacing.
And it's not just that thrill of success crossing the yard of brick. So many drivers celebrate with their own glass of milk as well. Someone like Scott McLaughlin, who was in action here on the iRacing service 12 months ago. He's getting his first taste of qualifying in the real world as well. And you can see here on our race facts brought to us by OpenWheels.com, who have very thoughtfully provided so many statistics for the community over the years. Scott McLaughlin has multiple top split wins, but no feature wins. We break these statistics up, Evan, into 2 categories. The feature is the broadcasted race, you know, the 1 out of the 4 that everyone focuses on. But like I was saying at the start, this is more than just the one race. It is truly a weekend celebrating the Brickyard and all of the history behind it. And for 4 different opportunities, we crown winners here at the Brickyard.
And not only is this one happening right now, the feature, but for many drivers who have been racing here at Indianapolis all weekend, it's their last crack at it, right? Some drivers in some of the lower splits may have been competing in these races over the course of the last day and change. And if they haven't gotten that desired Indy 500 to win in some of the other splits, they're all competing tonight as well. But you know it is so difficult to win when it took until years number 10 and 11 before we saw our first ever repeat winner, right? You heard the call from Will Vincent there from 2020, Brandon Traynor not only becoming the first repeat winner in iRacing Indy 500 history, but doing it back-to-back. Could he possibly look for a three-peat? We talk about the dominance of that team, and we've also never seen a pole sitter win the Indy 500 in the feature race, so there are a lot of historical data that tells us what may and may not happen. But Indy is where records are made and records are meant to be broken, and excited to see what's in store in this 2021 installment.
You can see there as well 7 feature starts for the likes of Lichtenberg, Miller, and Simpson. Miller didn't attempt a qualifying run from what I saw on the time chart, so Lichtenberg and Simpson will add to their number. 8 starts here in the 12th annual iRacing Indy 500. Talking about open wheels as well, the second consecutive year that the pole sitter in the month of November has carried that form over into the month of May as well. Youngo in 2019, your open wheels 500-mile race pole position winner, did it last year, 12 months ago, for the 2020 iRacing Indy 500, and the Italian Michele Costantini has done the same here today. We've still got 3 minutes of practice before we work our way into the race itself, so I want to talk about some predictions from my commentators, because somehow in the past month of November, I got things right, and I predicted a win for my teammate Hugo Olsen at the 2020 Open Wheels 500. 33 cars, blistering track temperatures as well. You can see there, 56 degrees Celsius, 133 degrees Fahrenheit. That is going to be tough, Justin, for the cars to make sure they can get through the 30-lap fuel stints on the tires as well.
And that's led to many of the drivers I spoke with prior to today's race emphasizing the need to pace themselves, to get yourself in a position to try and take home the checker flag, as well as managing the fuel. It's going to be very important. That's why, in turn, I think Traynor is in a great position to try and take home another victory. It's not going to be easy, of course, but he's got the track position. He's got the organization that's got great speed throughout this entire week with qualifying. But it's also going to be very critical, Arjuna, to try and make sure they have the pace when the green flag flies.
So Treno up for a third win in a row then. What about you, Evan? What are your predictions here with just 90 seconds left before we go trackside to take a look at the starting grid?
Well, I almost think that we're due for a pole winner, right? That's the most surprising thing to me, that we have not seen a pole winner here in the Indy 500, just because at the start of this race, it's going to be so critical to get through the start clean, right? So why not for Constantini at the front of the field to break that streak and to be the first pole winner to take the checkered flag in this 12th installment of the iRacing Indy 500?
So we've got two of the Apex Racing team drivers predicted then, and they'll line up 1, 2, 3, and 4. I tell you what, I'll go slightly differently here. I'm going to say the Brazilian Wilson Nato, always rapid in qualifying, now joined up with Powerslide Motorsports. What can he do? Moments away from going trackside, though. We are in Speedway, Indiana, and that means, as always, only one thing we can do here live on RaceSpotTV. It's time for Back Home Again in Indiana.
Back home again in Indiana, and it seems that I can see the gleaming candlelight still burning bright through the sycamores for me. The new moon hay sends all its fragrance through the fields I used to roam. When I dream about the moonlight on the Wabash, how I long for my Indiana home.
Let's go trackside then and take a look at the starting grid for the 2021 iRacing Indy 500. On pole position, it's the Italian Michele Constantini leading the charge for the Apex Racing team with Team I5G. Brandon Treno, Zach Campbell, and Johan Harth make it four of the Apex Racing team drivers on the front two rows of the grid. What can they do as they try and win once more at the track they call their home? Wilson Nato alongside Philip Kraus for the team talent. There will be two drivers very strong in today's action. Watch out from row number 3. Tanner Watkins, oh so close 12 months ago, coming to the line out of turn 4. He'll line up to the inside of Christopher Demeritt with Jason Brophy and Connor Harrington on row number 5. Henry Bennett, Christian Steele, they'll line up on row 6 in today's action, with Matt Pavelski and team talent Andrew Wood, row number 7. AJ Burden alongside the hyperstar Brendan Lichtenberg with the King of Chins, 2018 winner here, looking to do it once more alongside his teammate Austin Espati. Andreas Ake alongside Liam Quinn on the edge of the top 20 with Open Wheels 2020 winner Hugo Olsen lining up next to his teammate, the Canadian Andrew Kinsella. Rodrigo Franzoni for EG Racing. He'll line up alongside Chad Simpson for the VRS Satellite Racing team with Plino Ferreira alongside Riley Thompson. Yao Valverde alongside Jesper Orman, the Swede, lining up on the outside of row number 14 with Alexis Newsom, a revelation in the Lionheart Speedway Series, lining up in 29th alongside Jacob Oster. Adam Crane, James Walker, Frank Levick, 33 cars ready to rumble here. And Evan, as they work their way down into turn number 3, there is tension in the air.
And it is key to get through these opening laps. This is a long race due up at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. You do not want to get caught out early as those tires have to get up to pressure. It is going to be tricky the first couple of times around with that aero push. Keep an eye on that through the opening few laps. Let's see how aggressive drivers want to be, how conservative some others may be, and see if it is critical to get a good start to put yourself in a good position to win this thing in a few hours' time.
And just a reminder as well, you can stay in touch with us using the hashtag iRacing. We will follow along on social media and be interacting with you throughout the entirety of 200 laps of action History then on the cards for Brandon Traino, but he's got his teammates to contend with. It's an Apex Racing 1, 2, 3, and 4. No 3-wide start. You have to wait for the month of November to get that here on the iRacing service. Green flag flies for the 2021 iRacing Indy 500 as we go single file down in towards turn number 1. The field scampering for some track position. Restarts. They have been talked about as oh so important here, and already flying our way down in through turn 2 in excess of 340 kilometers an hour. Drivers trying to make the outside line work, and I think the king of chins there, Justin, might have got up into the outside wall.
Not the start he's going to have wanted in this race in the heart of the pack. He had talked about trying to be patient for this race, and that's going to be critical for many of these competitors. But the swap draft for some of the drivers coming into play already with Traino up front and one driver on the access road.
Oh, disaster for Tanner Watkins then. He's coming straight down onto pit road. Never mind, he's going to stay out there. I wonder if just momentum lost there for the 26 car. Across the line, though, to complete lap number 1. No change in the top 6. So Costantini from Traino, Campbell, and Harth already working their way down the back straightaway here, Evan.
Yeah, Watkins got a little bit loose in between turns 3 and 4, and instead of trying to force that car back up and onto the surface, he used that access road on the inside of turn number 4. Did decide to blend it back up, but decided to play the safe route and blend it back up into traffic. Of course, that's going to put Watkins to the back of the field early in this race. An up front change for the top spot. Traino to the number 1 position as we watch this group of cars battle off of quarter number 4. Everybody chasing down. Christian Steele, some of the other drivers in the midst of it all.
There's lots of action at the front. Swap drafting, very much the name of the game. I'm watching around in this mid-pack, though, to see who's got potentially the strongest car to work their way through lap traffic. There's Joshua Chin. A disappointing start. We thought he might have hit the wall, but already trying to get to the inside of AJ Burden. There is nothing doing there. Edge of the top 10, it's private label Team Hype's Jason Brophy with Henry Bennett closely chasing him down. The British Racing Green with the red wheels, always strong in an IndyCar. And 2 drivers, Justin, experienced in the IR18, but we've been commentating on them as rookies in the Lionheart IndyCar Series.
Yeah, Henry Bennett has been someone that's been trying to fight for good performances all season long, coming off his most recent race being the best he's had in the series so far. Then, of course, Jason Brophy's been strong on the ovals as well in that respective series. So it's been interesting to see them develop on that side of things. But up at the front, the drivers continue to swap back and forth, and this was a talking point for this organization when talking to both Campbell and Traino before today's race, where they were potentially going to do this and then potentially save a bit of fuel later on in this run, because this is the type of race where you have to work it backwards to try and figure out, okay, how much fuel do we need for that final pit stop if it goes green?
And talking to some of the drivers, recent updates to the IR18, not just a new damage and tire model, which very much have made this Dallara IR18 one of the premier cars on the service. You can also see the virtual head bobble here on this wonderful look that we're getting on board with Johan Harth. Look of focus on the face of the iRacing Rallycross World Champion as well. But Evan, when it comes to fuel saving, for so long in the iRacing meta, if you're going to use that esports term, it's always been about lifting and coasting, never really about fuel maps and what you can do with the car tools. That has changed recently, so the further back you are in this pack, we may be seeing drivers going down to fuel map 5, just trying to save some of that precious fuel.
Yeah, and you can go almost from basically 4 miles per gallon in clean air to about a 4.8 on a maximum save. And you're right, typically in sim racing, it's been about coasting, minimizing on throttle time to save fuel. But much like you've seen all month long at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and of course, the big storyline when we get to the actual Indy 500 are those fuel maps. iRacing continuing to make sure that this product is as close to real life as possible, and it adds that much more of an element as we watch this battle for 7, 8, 9, 10. A good, clean start to this 2021 Indy 500. But you just add that element on top of the pit stops, on top of balancing your aggression. It is really those factors that make this one of the most fun special events on the sim to compete in and spectate. It is far more than just seeing who can get around this 2.5-mile speedway the fastest. There is a lot of dedication, planning, and I think, having a game plan basically that goes into this one. But clean out of the gates, that's what everybody wanted to see.
I tell you what, now we're working lap 7. Last week we had the iRacing Fixed 500, the second annual edition of that race, and a slightly stop and start opening to the race, but it very much got its racing boots underneath them. We're taking a look at the RaceSpotTV replay right now, seeing what happened to Tanner Watkins, if we can. Oh, there was the bobble that we were talking about, and see if we can grab an aerial look, Justin, at what happened there to the 26 car.
You'll see it in particular in turn 3, I believe, coming up here for Watkins, where you're going to see right here just a bit of a bobble, and it just takes it to the access road to be able to keep it going. And loses a ton of track position, yes, but it was better than the alternative, having a compromised line and potentially pushing into someone side by side into turn 4. Here's the onboard in particular with it. You see going smooth and then just loses the back end, just that little tail end of the corner exit.
Good hands there to hang on to it. He's now fallen, though, to the tail end of the field, so lots of work for him to do to try and climb his way back up as we rejoin the live pictures. And once more, a swap for the race lead. They are starting to build up the gap very slightly here. It's now about 1.3 seconds between the race leader, Brandon Traino, and the closest non-teammate in Wilson Nadeau, who's had a bit of a slow start here, but I think just building up the speed there. Phil Krause on his tail as well. And Justin, we saw him take victory a week ago in that fixed 500. I wonder what he's learned and is carrying, that momentum forward here in the open setup, Indy 500.
There's a lot of similarities that we've noticed so far, of course, between the fixed to the open sides and that very hot track. But also the difficulty to pass with the aero wash is going to be something that will be very critical, because drivers, when they're trying to make moves, are likely going to move up towards that third line. Drivers attempted that on the fixed side, and for some it worked out, for some it was a bit of a struggle. Today it's not expected to be as big of a struggle, with it being open and the ability as well to be able to adjust things before you hit the racetrack. So we'll have to see how the adjustments have gone for Phil Krause for this open side to be able to perform today.
Lap 11 then. This is a great start. Still 33 cars out there and circulating. Does look as though timing 71 is not up and running, so we will get some live timing up for you in just a couple of moments' time. There goes Christopher Demerit to the inside then of Phil Krause in the 7. And the Team i5G driver that has won here at the Brickyard before, unable to get the momentum on the inside. And that's kind of what I'm expecting to see here over the course of the race, Evan. I mentioned it on the start of the race. Restarts are going to be crazy. It's going to be taking advantage of track position when you can.
And of course, you reference back to last year's races. Krause going to maintain that spot as Demerit backs out of it in his battle for 6th and 7th spot. You're going to need to pick your battles, right? I think that's a good call there by that number 1 car to just drop into that one for the time being. But we went a long way, nearly to halfway before we saw that first caution. So you're not going to want to bank on those for your strategy. These drivers, we talked about almost mapping this race out in reverse to the end of the race. Everybody in theory would like the race to go to the end of it without incident. They can play out their strategies. I think it would allow some of the drivers towards the back to maybe try something different as the side-by-side of the front of the field continues. This time it's Constantini back around Traino. 1-2, they continue to swap out the race lead. Their other teammates and Zach Campbell and Johan Harth are much more disciplined. They still sit exactly where they started in 3rd and 4th position. It is really only the top 2 right now that are swapping out spots inside of the top 5.
And yeah, I think the only other guys that I've been seeing swapping are down in about 24th position, where Riley Thompson and Jesper Orman are having a very fun scrap there. We're looking rearward from Costantini and watching from Traino, watching as Costantini uses the draft. I got myself a bit mixed up there, but it's all about timing the run, Justin, and that's what we saw 12 months ago as well. A one-lap shootout between Traino, Tanner Watkins, and Jason Brophy, and Traino, I think, almost timed that to perfection, the run out of turn number 4.
Yeah, you're going to see this once again. You can see him just trying to focus up on the eyes, see where the run builds up, just quickly get to the left side, and quickly get the run done before they get to the corner. And this is a way to be able to break away from the rest of the pack. They have been able to pull away by half a second as a result of their swap round. So it takes a lot of execution and coordination, because if you do it wrong to where you're side-by-side a majority of the corner, it loses you a couple tenths. So it takes that precision to do things, as One of the contenders in one of the fixed 500s throughout this preparation this week, Riley Thompson, currently in the midst of a battle for 23rd.
And you can see there the alternate line. You do not want to be following in the dirty wake of a car down on the inside, and by virtue as well, it sometimes means that the outside line is the place that you can defend as well. Thompson is now chasing down Franzoni. Thompson is up a couple of positions on the day. Left-hand side of the screen, you'll be able to follow along with the movers and shakers. Christian Steele is up 4 positions into the top 8. A very good run there from the i5G driver. Andrew Kinsella is also up 4 as well. But other than that, Evan, we're not really seeing too many big movers in the early stages of the race.
And Christian Steele's got a few. He's up 4 spots to the number 8 position. But look at the top 6, right? No movement. And Justin talks about those drivers executing those passes with the draft. If all those top 4 cars, those teammates sat in line, everybody else would stick with them. Again, you're going to lose time to the cars behind you being aggressive and making passes if you just lift and don't make passes. So that's why Trado and Constantini are swapping out the race lead so that they don't have to stay off the throttle quite as much. And then that allows their teammates and Campbell and Hart to draft off of them. And that's why those top 4 are continuing to pull away. But mid-pack, not surprised that we have a little bit of that movement, but a majority of the cars in the top 10 haven't really gained or lost a ton, and I think that ties in with, we were expecting restarts tonight to be pretty crazy, and we'll see as we get later into the event as we go on board there with Demerit riding in the number 7 spot right now. But early in this race, we didn't really see that much. I saw a glimmer of 3 wide on lap number 2, but it ended pretty quickly, and it was halfway down the back straightaway. These drivers really not wanting to go too wide into the corners. We've seen several instances where somebody attempts to make a pass, but they only get about a halfway alongside the car in front of them, and then they back out of it into the corner. Not shocked that the guys in the top 10 aren't really moving anywhere on Junior, because they're in a good spot. The guys mid-pack are the ones who have to make some of the more aggressive moves early, and the intervals is the big thing, right? For a Chin and Espity, you might be up a few spots, 37 seconds off of the race lead. That's why qualifying so important in an event like this. Not the only one, of course. We mentioned a pole sitter's never won this feature top split race at the iRacing Indy 500, but not at all surprised the people inside of the top 10 have been playing it nice thus far.
One thing I'm a bit curious about here, Justin, is look at the very almost square arms of Christopher Demerit here. I would feel like that would be somewhat uncomfortable, especially when you consider all you're doing for 200 laps here is turning left right now. And you can see there's a bit of tension on the elbow that maybe might not be the most comfortable, and that's where the range of different setups comes in. Some of these drivers will be on, the intro Logitech wheels. I know, for example, Alexis Newsom still races on a Logitech Driving Force Pro, but a lot of the drivers as well, modern day technology has come so far, and direct drive wheels really send so much feedback back to the driver.
Yeah, I'm someone that races with a direct drive wheel personally, where it can cause your teeth to chatter when trying to wield that race car, but posture is going to be very critical for some of these competitors to make sure they don't get arm fatigue or any major wear, as one driver has come down to the pit lane with side pod damage.
Oh, and what a shame for Jacob Oster in his first attempt at qualifying for the iRacing Indy 500. Made it through, joined up with the Total Downforce Racing guys as well. Not sure that's how he would have hoped his day would have ended, but the new damage model really does let you get away with a lot more. Let's see if we can pick up what happened here to his car. We're taking a look at James Walker instead, and I think he got a brief view there, Evan, of his teammate sliding up into the outside wall through turn number 2.
Yeah, Oster was running back several positions at about 30th at the time of the incident, and off into turn number 1, he just got the fence right there. When he went down into turn number 1, it was on his own. He didn't actually get too low, right? I thought maybe he would have gone down on the rumble strip, the curb a little bit and loosened it up, but he just had way too much push off the corner, and that was pretty significant right side damage. And we talked about the new damage model with these cars, and it really hurt the right front, so it was a slow limp to pit road, and that car has been in the box for some time now. Oster could be the first driver to fall off of the lead lap early in this one.
Not just him coming down onto pit road, though. Pavelski coming down, followed down by his teammate AJ Burden. So Team i5G is trying something different. Justin, can they cycle through in front of the Apex Racing alliance that they've got? It's going to be close for Burden. Pavelski might just have the draft to be able to hold with the leading group.
They might actually come out right in the battle for the race lead, so this is going to change things a little bit keep in mind that these drivers are the ones trying to work it backwards, where we talked about they're taking that short pit stop that's expected towards the end of the race right now. So this is an interesting call. They were in the middle of the pack, keep in mind, so this may be a call they're saying, we don't have track position, may as well see what we can do by changing things up and trying something different and get ourselves in the mix of the race leaders. The downside is some of the race leaders are now going to have the aero wash to deal with some of these lap cars.
And like we were saying at the start, I mean, blistering track temperatures when we came here 12 months ago was about 125 degrees Celsius, if I'm remembering correctly. Almost a 10-degree jump then up to 133. Very much has meant single file running in the opening 23 laps so far. And now I think for the first time it's not going to be a swap between Costantini and Traino. Zach Campbell has gotten through on his teammate AJ Burden as we come through turn 4 to complete this 23rd lap here. It is still the Apex Racing Team 1, 2, 3, and 4, with Wilson Nato and Phil Krause staying where they started in 5th and 6th respectively. But in the top 10, you've got six drivers representing one team, 2 names, but one team in effect, Evan, and then you've got a couple of the Team Talent guys and 1 Powerslide Motorsports. It's just an indication of how much work goes in to being quick here at the Brickyard.
It is, and certainly when you get your teammates inside of the top 4, right, those drivers are going to have a big advantage in this race, but it is going to be a momentous challenge to stay up there and control those positions. They have been very good at the start of this race, being able to maintain those positions, as you see them swap it out now, and this time it is side by side with a little bit of traffic there as Pavelski gets his way through along by your race leader, Constantini. That's the difference, fresh tires and old ones after about 20 laps, with Pavelski deciding to come down to the pit lane. But it is really going to be those pit cycles, executing, not only being good on your strategy, but also making sure your strategy is the winning one. In a race that has a green flag start through the opening 25 laps of it, once you get one driver to split up those top 4, it's going to be a lot more difficult for them to be as coordinated as they are. Again, their drafting plan has worked great, right? 5th place with Will Sedato, so about 2.3 seconds off for the race lead. Your top 2 have actually pulled away substantially from Campbell and Hart the last couple of laps. You can see those intervals left-hand side of your screen as we watch a battle for 23rd with Riley Thompson and company. Thompson been busy in this one in that number 15 machine, but all it takes is one driver to puncture that bubble of 4, and we've got ourselves a race.
See, there's Jesper Orman, part of 3 Crowns Racing. He was very impressive in November, building up speed in the 2020 Open Wheels 500 qualifying process. Slightly different there. You only get 3 runs, and each time you head back out onto track, you withdraw your previous times. There's so much pressure on driver's shoulders. Just a little bit different of a picture that you get in virtual Indy 500 qualifying. Orman continues the run here in 2021. 6 positions gained on the day so far. More importantly, though, Justin, at least for me, is the way that the 3 Crowns Racing program continues to develop. It's now not just the Scandinavian drivers, an increasing wave of drivers from our side of the world as well. Alexis Newsom, who, like I said at the start of the show, has been a revelation in the Lionheart Speedway Series. 2 victories on the season so far, the only driver to have won more than 1 race. And if not for some slight bad luck in terms of strategy, just a couple of days ago on Monday, she might have taken another victory to add to her collection.
Yeah, Alexis Newsom in that regard has been really talented when it comes to strategizing in particular for races. The main thing that Newsom has to work on is battling in dirty air, in my opinion, Arjuna, because in the Speedway Series, when Alexis qualifies well, Alexis is usually able to keep the track position and then pull away. But when it's, say, a 4th or even a 5th place starting spot, it's not as easy because the aero wash, but also sometimes we've seen Newsom drop back. Twin Ring Motegi is one example where qualified well, lost clean air, dropped back into the heart of the pack. So it takes a lot of time in seat time to develop. But as things are going on, one driver just elected to come in. Orman is elected to come down at about lap 29.
Right at the entry of the pit window as well. You can do about 32 laps without too much saving in traffic. So for Jesper Orman, blinking early, maybe just trying to cycle through into some more favorable track position. You see Tanner Watkins cycling his way on through. He lost the draft very early on and has been doing lap times in the 41.971 bracket, so he's got some work to do if he wants to try and replicate his success 12 months ago. Here comes the race leaders, though, as well. Both Costantini and Brandon Traino. No mistake from Costantini, and he'll be hoping to continue that throughout the entirety of the race. Important thing about pitting under green here, Evan, you do not go one lap down if you're at the front of the field. Slightly different if you're someone like Jesper Orman.
Yeah, we saw some of the drivers who pitted earlier, right? About 33.5-ish seconds. Some drivers into the 34s for your total pit lane time. And your race leaders looking at about 41 seconds. So look at this well-coordinated effort. They're going to be in and out. Only 9 seconds in the box for those two. They'll be out and away and should be able to draft ahead. Teammate Zach Campbell just now crossing the Art of Bricks. They're in the center of 1 and 2. They're going to go all the way up on the racetrack to give themselves as much arc as they can on that access road on the inside of 2. They're back out and they maintain their lead lap, and 2 of them came down. Campbell and Harth now cycle out to the race lead first time tonight. The number 2 machine, Campbell, gets some laps led here at Indianapolis, and I would expect those 2 to then pit together as well, because you don't want to be down on your own. Again, having somebody to dance with, especially a teammate, awfully critical, and we'll see just how far apart these duos of teammates want to get.
I would expect, not this time maybe, but the next time, to see Campbell in the gold trim Apex Racing car. And we talked about Team RLL winning 12 months ago, as I see Henry Bennett peeling his way down onto the pit lane as well. 12 months ago, Team RLL not just victorious in the virtual Indy 500, Brandon Traino representing the famed Rahal Letterman Lanigan outfit. It was in the real world as well. Takuma Sato winning once more at the Brickyard. I'll be hoping to have just as good a run here in 2021. Campbell represented the outfit in the 2021 Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup, his first round of World Championship competition. Locked himself back into the action for 2022 as well, alongside teammate Kevin Ellis Jr. Working lap 32. Apex Racing teammates stay out. Nato comes down onto the pit lane, and he's followed in, Justin, by Philip Kraus.
And the window expected to go as far as 34 laps for some drivers on gas for today, depending on their fuel mapping and how much they've been saving. And right now, Campbell and Hart have been able to save a decent amount compared to the front runners. In fact, they've indicated they're coming in this time by. So it's been intriguing how this plays out. Up to 6 pit stops at minimum are expected for today's race for some of these drivers to be able to make it to the end on gas. It's just a matter of how those pit stops all break down and how much time they can pick up in the pit lane.
Here they come then. Campbell, Harth, Demerit, and Steele, all 4 teammates in the I5G with Apex Racing program. Here comes Olsen. Here comes Chad Simpson as well. Can you believe it? His 8th feature race appearance in an iRacing Indy 500. An incredible run for the VRS Satellite Racing driver. His teammate Adam Crane follows him down as well. Important pit stops. You cannot afford to slide through your box. And left-hand side of your screen, you'll see it's basically a pit party as the final cars make their way down onto the lane. Campbell drops from the jacks. Will Harth beat him off? It's going to be close between the 2 of them. Campbell leads, but it's going to be Traino and Costantini, Evan, that cycle through to a several-second advantage here.
Yeah, they got onto the fresher tires sooner. They got the advantage, and that is going to split up that once group of 4 into 2 sets of 2. But you talk about how critical it is to be good in the box. You can't really afford to overshoot it. That second's going to take you away from everybody else that you pitted with. But there was so much time to be gained and or lost in and out of the pit lane as well. That's not going to show up on our stopwatch as far as time on pit road, right? You saw those drivers locking it up as they got it down to pit road speed here at Indianapolis is 60 miles an hour. And then those 2 sets almost of access roads down on the inside. They don't treat it as one. Again, they get through turn 1 and then set themselves up to try to stay full on the gas through turn number 2. That is where a ton of time can be made and or lost. But just like that, everybody has cycled through pit road, and Traino and Costantini get to go back to 1-2 as we start to close in on quarter distance in this Indy 500.
And so the strategy call is we see a swap for the race lead once more that we saw from Pavelski and Burton in the 14 and the 17. Justin has actually net them a couple of extra positions. You can see Pavelski inside the top 10 with Burton peeking in from 11th right now.
And they were able to do so by turning some pretty quick lap times and being able to swap with the race leaders, keep in mind, some of them. So they were able to pick up those extra few positions. Now, it's going to be the long game. That's going to be how things play out, though. That's the thing, Arjuna, because it's going to take the whole race for them to cycle further and further and further up the pylon. So that patience is going to need to be tested for some of these drivers to realize, okay, we're going to be on older rubber. We're going to have an offset by at least 10 to 13 laps for some of the other competitors. You have to be careful as Vernon has scraped the wall, it appears, coming into an arc into turn 3.
Lost a whole heap of momentum as he comes down in towards 4 now. Have Connor Harrington on his tail, so we'll wait and see if Burton loses any more speed. But the thing I've noticed in my preparation over the last couple of weeks is that you can get away with a few more wall taps than you could 12 months ago. The new damage model is both more brutal while also more relenting at times. Can also get some of that damage fixed up when you need to do so. Evan, I've got a bit of a question for you here. Let's take a look at the onboard with Connor Harrington right now. He's making his first iRacing Indy 500 appearance. A number of drivers are doing that here, but as someone who has commentated on World Championship competition for so many years, you must have talked to so many drivers who put in that same level of effort and want the same level of result. They have an expectation when they come to a race like this that they will finish up in the top 10. And for Connor Harrington to qualify in the top 10 in his very first run, he is very delighted at how things went.
Yeah, for the most part, drivers, when they get to this level, it's not their first foray into some of these major events, right? Especially these days, and you talk about, of course, all the years that I've seen the likes of the NASCAR Coca-Cola Series and others, in which one of our drivers is a previous winner of this Indy 500. You mentioned John Gorlinski way back in 2010, the pole sitter in that one, I should say. But these drivers are not afraid of the spotlight. They may have a little bit of nerves on the grid, but they expect to win. They're not just happy to be here. They're not, oh, well, we made it into top split. That's going to be a good day. We'll finish 33rd and improve on it next year. They expect to finish up towards the front of the field. And if they have any nerve, some drivers have a lot, some have virtually none. The consistent thing is when the green flag flies, they're locked in, and all of that fades away, and you are 110% focused on the task at hand. Now, you talk about some of the driving position of some of these other drivers, and fatigue can definitely be a real thing in a 500-mile race at Indy. Now, not quite the level of fatigue you're going to see with real-life drivers of the NTT IndyCar Series. Some of the onboard cameras, we see the in-sim drivers' helmets bobbing around. You don't have all those G-forces, so it certainly is way easier than risking life and limb going 230 miles an hour around in a real IndyCar. But in a long race like this, these drivers do have to position themselves in a way that'll make them comfortable for a long race. Physical fatigue, and not quite yet, but as we get kind of towards the middle portion of the race and trickle down maybe towards three-quarter distance, you will have a little bit of mental fatigue that is critical for these drivers to stay sharp.
And I'm not going to maybe criticize anyone here. That's not the point I'm going to try and make here, but when we saw the real-life drivers make their way onto the iRacing service, there were some calamities, especially that first race at Michigan, if I do remember, on the ovals, an interesting sort of sequence of events on the green flag. When the drivers headed out to Gateway just later in 2020, we saw similar amounts of carnage on lap number 1, so it's not as though they do not make the same sort of mistakes in the real world that they make on the sim. Just thought I'd point that out anyway. Here, by the way, is an interesting battle for third. You see the two teammates, Justin, swapping back and forth with Campbell and Harth, squabbling over third, but these guys are losing track of the race leaders. It was half a tenth of a second the last time around, and they are 4.6 seconds adrift.
You have to wonder if they're using different field mappings possibly to try and save a little bit, because of course they stretched it about 5 laps further than the current race leaders, currently running about a tenth of a second slower per lap. I wouldn't be too concerned right now, because they may be thinking big picture here, trying to think, okay, maybe we can try and short fuel in the final stops of this race. Maybe we can save time in the pit lane. Maybe there's a chance we can try and cut out a stop if we can with the amount of pit stops estimated for today's race and a 20-lap buffer period for that final stop. All of that comes into play, and they're trying to swap draft right now to get away from the rest of this pack, where the rest of the grouping is all just staying single file and spread apart by about 3 car lengths apiece.
Wilson Nato almost seems content to ride around where he is and just use that draft. And in terms of our picks here, let's give the 43-lap update, because relatively clean to start this one off, and knocking on all the wood I can around me, this looks like it might be a very interesting strategy battle through 200 laps of green flag action. Wilson Nato, not sure if he's necessarily in the best position possible, but we'll have to wait and see. Your pick, Evan, might be looking a little bit better right now.
Yeah, still up front. Constantini and Treno have been able to stick together, and, of course, we saw that their advantage went from about 1.2, 1.3 seconds over the likes of Campbell and Harth to mid-4 seconds, right? That's solely because they opted to stay out a little bit longer. That second group did, and your race leaders pitted about 4 laps sooner. They get the fresh tires, they get some time. But the advantage on the tires that then went in favor of the 2 and the 27 doesn't last that long, right? So they're on 10-lap old tires, your leaders are on 14-lap old tires, but those tires have already evened out. So it appears that that shorter strategy, not a short pit like some of the guys I think coming in at 20, the likes of Pavelski and Burton, who really came down early. I'm not sure if that's a good strategy long term. You could go anywhere from 6 pit stops to up to 10 if you're going to be going that short, but I think that tells me that you could stretch it to 34, 35 on a run and maybe go for a 6-stopper instead of 7 if this run goes green. But for Constantini up front, I mean, that was a perfect execution. You're not losing Tom at the back end of the strategy. I think if he and Treno can keep this green, which is the most important thing for them, they're pretty much in the catbird seat at this point. And you saw how much they gained over one pit cycle. That goes to the point that I said that really is where this race is won or lost.
Watch this. Wilson Nato has just got mugged by Christopher Demerit. It's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Apex Racing I5G contingent now. Over under first, almost attempted from Demerit in the one machine. Does indicate, by the way, the highest oval I rating, 7,144. Watch here, though, Justin, coming in through turn number 1. I'm not sure if Nato almost gives up the position here.
I think he just realized at the last moment that he got the run to the high side and realized, okay, if I keep my foot in it, we're making contact. So as soon as he got essentially side by side and got the spotter call, I think that's where he backed off and realized, okay, it's too early to fight this aggressively for this position. Give you the space. As you can see, Christopher Demerit really wanted that track position and really got that pass done. It can be difficult, as we talked about the pass, but you can get the job done to the outside in turns 1 and 3.
Very impressed by that, I must say. Confidence on display, and now, first time we've seen a car work its way up into the top 5. Nato finds himself on the outside looking in. Philip Kraus is falling adrift as well. Big gaps are starting to form here. You have a leading group, of course, of Costantini and Treno. Gap back to Zach Campbell and Johan Harth, almost 5 full seconds. So the leaders are doing exactly what they need to do. Last time at the line, it was a 41.088 for Costantini, a 158 for Zach Campbell. Watching for the times this time around, it's once more, Evan, a full 10th being gained by the race leaders.
And we've seen Campbell and Harth change up the strategy a little bit, right? When it was those 4 cars close up front, they kind of let Constantini and Treno do the drafting, do the swapping. They pretty much stayed in line. Well, they're not getting anything off of the back of the race leaders from 5 seconds behind. So you see right here, Harth going to stay to the outside, Campbell back down, throw on the bottom. They're having to employ that same strategy that Constantini and Treno were doing up at the front of the field. But I don't know if they're getting, if they're going to get reeled in here, if Demerit's really going to want to fight with them, if Nato and Kraus and these other drivers 6 and 7 are going to want to get into the mix as well. But they are definitely having to work harder now than they did on that first run. And again, I think further showing that 30-lap stint just a better call than the 34, because Treno and Constantini really reaping the benefits of getting away from everybody else. We talk about this as the point in the race where things are going to start to spread apart. You've got 5 seconds between second and third. You've got 4 seconds between 7th and 8th. But in the middle of all of that, 5 race cars within about 1.5 seconds of each other. So that battle, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, cars that just cannot separate, as some side-by-side further back and off and into turn number 3. I think that was Olsen on the bottom making a move on Henry Bennett up top as they fight for 13th and 14th.
There's no love lost between the two teammates there. Bennett holds strong on the outside line, the British racing green. 007 is the number Bennett usually likes to run. He's the 6 here today. I wonder what 006 would have to say about that. The 2020 Open Wheels 500-mile race winner is the biggest mover of the day as well here. 7 positions gained, and in a race, Justin, where we thought it was going to be strategy that cycles cars forward, I think we're going to have to take a look at maybe thinking about someone like Hugo Olsen, very confident and adapting that car over the course of the run, able to find their way through.
Yeah, it seems like Hugo definitely wants to push on forward as we look back at Joshua Chin once more. But you're right. It can be tough where if you don't nail the qualifying run, it can be where it can be tricky. But we'll see how things play out here as we fall back along with Chin.
I was just taking a look at the driver webcams that we do have for today's action, and well, let's see if I can pull him up there. You can see there's a chuckle on the face. A few moments ago, it was not just a chuckle, it was a full-on laugh as he was coming down this back straightaway. Working, though, in 16th position. What we're seeing right now is race setup development. There was a week-long qualifying grind where drivers improved their lap times, not by tenths, not by hundreds, but by thousands every single time they went. Matt Pavelski back down onto pit road. He, of course, came down very early on in that first cycle. But at this point now, Evan, you're looking like certain drivers, even within the same team, for example, Joshua Chin, part of private label Team Hype with Team Talent, is not looking as comfortable as Philip Kraus is up there in 7th position.
Yeah, and I don't know what the perfect mix is, not strategy-wise, but just in the car, right? You talked about that physical fatigue, that mental fatigue. I'm somebody who I can't talk while driving. Somebody can talk to me, I can't talk back while driving, or it just takes me out of it. But I don't think you can isolate yourself for 3.5 hours in this race, or you are going to have that moment where maybe you start to get a bit of tunnel vision. And we saw with that incident with Oster earlier in this race how little it takes to overdrive one corner and end your night. So it'll be interesting to watch as we keep an eye on those cameras, who's talking, who's not, who's stretching, who's tense, and just see what the recipe is to just stay focused for this race. I mean, a green flag pace is good news for everybody, right? Past quarter distance, working lap 53, you can see coming off of the pit lane there is AJ Burton. We already saw Riley Thompson cycle through into Matt Pavelski on pit road. So those are the earliest drivers trickling down. The rest of your race leaders should be thinking about it. And about 6 to 7 laps would be the earliest pit stops, maybe including the likes of Constantini and Treno up at the front of the field.
Yeah, at the left side you can see the stint length, and of course, but anywhere between 29 and I'd say 33 laps is a regular run on fuel. And now if you're feeling confident and brave, you might want to try and extend it to 35 or so. That is a number I've heard said on occasion. And Justin, we talked about this a week ago. Count backwards from the end of the race, right? So what are your magic numbers? It's what? 167 and then so on and so forth. If we see what we saw last time where a caution ended the race and Philip Kraus, almost by virtue of being at the front of the field with 10 laps to go, had the race in control, it might be a very similar position here today.
I think potentially as well, absolutely, with how things have played out in this race. And some of the teams I talked to had mentioned that they put in a ton of preparation for every single potential scenario, where they practice different strategies, they practice different fuel mappings, they practice different ways to plan things out. And we're seeing some of that execution now come into play, where teams are realizing, okay, let's try strategy number C. Let's try strategy A. Let's try strategy B. All of them trying different ways to find their way up at the front. And that's the key thing. Getting yourself in position to be up at the front. And that's what some of these teams have done very well. Some of them not as well. As the caution is out for the first time.
And it's Polino Ferreira for the EG Racing team has noticed that just as you saw it as well. So the caution flies for the first time today. Lap 56, and it's the 31 car coming in through turn 4. It's turned around facing in the wrong direction. And let's see if we can pick up the RaceSpotTV replay. That looks like a relatively sorry state. I'm not sure, Evan, if that car is going to be able to roll back out onto the track.
If anything, he's fortunate that he's close to the pit road entry, but this is a big hit. Watch the replay. Riding in P26, gets the outside wall and a huge impact with the inside. He bounces back up and onto the racetrack. He was in a three-way fight with Valverde and Crane for 24, 25, and 26. You can see, and it looked like maybe a little bit of the rumble strip down low. Got that number 31 machine out of shape, and it was on for a ride. Huge hit.
One more look. I tell you what, let's look at this aerial one and go super slow-mo. And indeed, not just down below the white line, but like you pointed out, Evan, onto the curb as well. Sent him up the track, spat down back into the inside wall, reminiscent of Oliver Askew 12 months ago in the real world as well. He's fortunate to miss the attenuator. Debris goes flying across the track. Always looks wonderful with the new damage model. And for the first time today then, Justin, caution flies. The question I have, which driver is coming down onto pit road?
I would expect just about all the drivers to come down to the pit road with the timing of this caution flag. It's just a matter, though, of who wants to try and mix things up. Others, though, are going to try and take the wave, it looks like, to try and get themselves back in the lead lap on different cycles here.
It's going to be a busy, busy time down on pit road. So it looks like Tanner Watkins, Riley Thompson will get their lap backs. Matt Pavelski and AJ Burden, who had just come down onto pit road, will also cycle around to the front. The race off of pit road, then let's see if anything changes, as for the first time today, drivers have pit stops under caution. Does look like we're getting a change. Is it going to be Zach Campbell that emerges as the new race leader? Demerit is up into third, that is for sure. Costantini holds on to first. Traino slips to fourth then. Interesting to see what happened there, Evan. Looks like a slightly longer stop for the 3-car.
Yeah, I wonder if Traino and Constantini go a little bit longer on fuel or if they made some adjustments. Campbell and Demerit were perfect on the pits at 8.2 seconds stop in the box, some of the fastest we saw, but look at Traino at 9.1. It was about an identical time for Constantini. There's Campbell with an 8 flat in second spot, so that is why Campbell and Demerit pick up and Traino drops down significantly, and all I said was it takes one driver to get up front to make this thing a race. And well, now you got Christopher Demerit, the highest I-rated driver in the field, who started 8th on the grid, going to be right up there inside of the top 4. And it doesn't affect the strategy for your leaders much, right? It's lap 58. They probably would have been pitting at about 2 laps from now. Maybe it makes your number a little bit longer to the end of the race if you're hoping it can stretch out green to that point. But certainly the timing not ideal for the likes of Pavelski, Burton, Watkins, and Thompson. You talk about how your race leaders, they can pit Arjuna and not lose the lead lap. Unfortunately, for those 4 cars who had pitted at the beginning of this cycle, they did. So that's why they are forced to stay out, get a wave around, and not only are they going to drop to the back of the field, but they'll also be at a back foot on the strategy and a little bit shorter on fuel in doing so.
Trying to just remember, which year was Demerit the champion? Demerit won in 2017 here at the Brickyard, and it was Pavelski that won in 2016. And of course, they added 2019 and 2020 with Brandon Traino taking victory. And in the month of November, it was Michele Costantini in 2019, the inaugural Open Wheels 500-mile race victor. So many accolades for the team that not only calls this track their home, but has put the track into their team name as well. Justin, you had a point you wanted to bring up about the King of Chins just before that caution came up. What were you noticing there for the King of Chins?
Well, one of the things had been mentioned, and you were mentioning the lightheartedness from him on his on-camera, where he wanted to try and approach this race in a calm manner because he's had a good lead-up. We talked about the race for Lionheart. He also came away with the victory in the Major Series for its Indy 500 on Sunday in preparation. So he had a lot of momentum coming in. But the main thing was he felt like he missed it just a bit in qualifying, where he couldn't get the same qualifying speed compared to Jason Brophy as well as some of the other teammates he had. So for Joshua Chin, this is a good opportunity, this caution flag period now, to potentially try and leap up and get towards where his teammates are in 8th and 9th.
Well, he was in victory lane on Wednesday in the Lionheart IndyCar Series as they visited the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course. Only the third time in series history they've done that. The previous two winners went on to become Lionheart champions. King of Chins will be hoping to do the same here in a couple of weeks' time when Lionheart comes to the Brickyard as well. For the first time today, then, we say the pace car is back down onto the safety of pit road. The field left in control of Michele Costantini and Zach Campbell already side by side. Here comes Brandon Traynor roaring his way back up into the podium positions. He doesn't want to waste too much time here, Evan, behind his teammates.
He does it, and we'll see how aggressive will they be off of this restart compared to the initial green flag of the race. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Still single file in line down the back straightaway. Here's a look now. How about from third? Campbell now. Trano going to get around him on the inside. And back to 1, 2. Go the 13 and the 3. For how long, though? Does Christopher Demerit want to get up into the mix as well? Does he want to mess with that trio in front of him? He may have a good look this time at a 4.
Seeing on my timing screen that Tanner Watkins had cycled down onto pit road as we came back to the green flag action, so he's going to be right in front of the race leaders in just a couple of laps time. So watch for lap traffic to be a factor for, I think, the first time today as we work lap 61 in the 2021 iRacing Indy 500. There is Watkins in the 26. Still out there and circulating, trying to recover what he can from today's action. It's going to be difficult then, I think, for him to stay out of the way and not lose too much time here, Justin.
Yeah, this is going to be able to be picked up quickly. That draft, I should rather say, from Brandon Traynor, or to Brandon Traynor from Tanner Watkins. It's just a matter right now of how they elect to line things on up. It's going to be an impact as well, though, for the air wash of the corners, so this may close up the pack a little bit.
You can see it's basically single file throughout the entire field. We get that static camera hovering just above the yard of bricks. Might be in for a slightly different finish compared to what we saw 12 months ago. As you see, there's a couple of cars ducking into line there. It was Jason Brophy in front of his teammate Connor Harrington. More teammates side by side. There goes the Swede Hugo Olsen to the inside of Bennett. And the good thing about the time zone or the time slot that we're racing in is usually IndyCar competition on the iRacing service, Justin, especially when we think of Lionheart, which is late in the evening for both you and myself. This is a race, starts at 5 p.m. UTC. It allows everyone across the globe basically to connect at a convenient time, and it allows someone like Hugo Olsen, who, as his teammate, I can pull the curtain back. He's just finished a 7-hour exam before coming here for today's action. He's up 10 positions on the day, hunting down a top 10 position here.
That's incredible, first of all, to have an exam that long, but second of all, to be able to then come right back home and say, okay, let's race for 2-3 more hours and see what we can do. And it's been impressive. He's been able to make aggressive moves on these starts, and he seems to be getting better and better as this race has gone on. It's just a matter, though, of in front, and for now, he keeps on wanting to find that clean air pocket on the bottom. The thing is, he's just had that difficulty of passing by Bennett, who was very successful as well in European region action for the Major Series over the weekend, coming away with the top 3.
I believe Henry Bennett is an 8-time iRacing IndyCar Open champion, and lots of coverage on RaceSpotTV of IndyCars. We've got Lionheart, we've got, of course, the Open Wheels 500 coming up in November, the ISOWC featuring not just some of the best IndyCar drivers, but World Championship competitors as well, including the likes of Johan Harth, the iRacing Rallycross World Champion. What has happened to Johan Harth? I was just noticing on my timing screen here, Harth is all the way down in 26th position. His pit stop time was relatively normal here. But Evan, the Frenchman, finds himself in a whole world of trouble.
Yeah, it looks like he pitted with everybody else on pit road, but then he came back in a second time around and went back into the pit stall. It was a very short stop. We talk about most drivers being in the 9-second range or so. He was very quick in the box, but that put it back to P26 for the restart, and he has not gained time since then. So Harth giving up a ton of time, and I'll tell you what, the look from P26 very different than that of running inside of the top 5. So the reason for that double pit stop had to come back down after getting his initial service.
And let's take a look at his face. Not not too much emotion, which is typical of Johan. I mean, that's the thing that I think I'm most impressed with, and sometimes frustrated with as well. You'll get to talk to him in a post-race interview, and it's almost like you're talking to a Scandinavian driver. The answers are so short and succinct, but he knows what he wants, and that is to be the best in everything he can do. 26th position. He will have a charge up through the field. It might be strategy that cycles him through. Talking to the Apex Racing teammates, they were saying they'll all be in the same voice chat at the same time. So no individual spotter, no individual engineer or anything like that, Justin, which sometimes you might think is normal for a big team like Apex. But an event like this, it's so collaborative in nature, and knowing where everyone is and what they're doing is so important that, at least for these guys, they've decided that is the best way to communicate.
Yeah, it allows the opportunity to see, okay, how are they doing? What do I need to change for my line? Is there something that's being done for the bar or the weight checker that I'm not trying, that I can try to get some track position back? There's all sorts of things you could be discussing at this point. But the main thing I think right now for Harth is just trying to think big picture, because at the very least appear to try and top off on the gas to make sure at the moment that they get towards those magic numbers a little bit more safely and securely. The tough part's going to be getting back to the pack to try and get that track position back, because he's definitely got the car. It's pretty clear based on what we're seeing, able to make the move easily on the bottom side here to move up one more spot. It's just a matter of getting back what is essentially a 9 to 10 second disadvantage as a result of topping off.
James Walker lost not one, not two, but 3 places to Apex Racing and i5G. First it was Pavelski, then it was Johan Harth, and then AJ Burden, all in the course of about just 1.5 miles. Interesting call then from the Frenchman, and speculation as to what happened there. We'll see. Maybe we can get the update from the Apex Racing teammates slightly later in the action. Turn the attention back up front then. As a result of Harth dropping down, Wilson Nadeau re-inherits 5th position, but look at this, right on the tail of Tanner Watkins. Here come the race leaders, Evan.
Your race leader is charging through, and it just seems like a strange call in regards to Harth. So Harth, it'll be fun to realize, or interesting to realize what happened there if we get a chance to talk to him later on. But it has changed the complexion of this race. Nadeau in 5th wants to get up into the mix. Christian Steele, one of the biggest movers from 12th on the grid, is up and into the mix as well. And it's allowing some of those mid-pack cars as well to join, right? Your biggest mover of all of them is Hugo Olsen from 21st to 11th position. I think is a little bit too far back to worry about that lead pack, at least on this run, but that is the kind of progress you want to make if you want to ease yourself in to a battle for the race win later on tonight. Look at all that green, right? Kraus down 1, Constantini down 1, but a lot of those mid-pack drivers working their way to the cusp of the top 10.
Evan, I hate to do this to you, but I did it to my fellow commentators in November, so you get the RaceSpot pronunciation guide as well. Constantini, there's no N there at the start, and I was very guilty of that myself when I first started commentating. Costantini, not Constantini.
I do the same thing with Vicente, with the Coke series.
Oh,
I'm aware that it's Vicente, but my brain just tries to say Vincente. Very aware that there is no N. Apologies to Chente and apologies to Costantini in the battle for this one. It's those tricky things. Apologize to Bigelet up there, up towards the front of the field. We'll figure it out, though, because we'll be talking about him a lot tonight, still riding in that number 2 position right now. And we talked about the traffic, right? Watkins was getting chased down by your leaders. We saw your leaders snaking down the back straightaway to stay in that tow. They have yet to get around the 26, but that's going to happen here shortly. We'll see how well they can execute it.
RaceSpot's Connery Maddox saying he never noticed that about Michele's name as well. I mean, that's the thing. We commentate on so many races, so many people from across the globe as well. Sometimes we just need the reminder to say it a particular way. I mean, we were talking before we came on air. Andreas Ake, who's down in 19th position right now. When I started commentating 12 months ago on IndyCar competition, I believe I said his name correctly. Then one of my teammates told me I was saying it wrong, so I started saying it the way they told me to say it. Until 7 days ago, when Andreas very thoughtfully sent me a message saying, I know you don't commentate on my races too often, but next time maybe you can say it correctly, so making the effort to do that for now. lap 73. The laps are ticking away here. Only one caution on the day so far, Justin. I must say, compared to the fixed 500, very similar in terms of the single-file nature of this, but look at how close now the top 20 is. Only 7 seconds separating 20 Dallara IR18s.
Near identical with lap times as well. Right now separated by about a tenth or so in terms of the lap times they are turning. So it's very similar in terms of how they're running, in terms of lines, in terms of the air wash, as well as the draft lock that is keeping them all together and packed up as one for the time being. Now, if they stay together, it's going to be the big question, but they have reeled in Tanner Watkins at the very front of the field, so that is, I think, also the factor of why your top two haven't been able to swap draft like they normally would so far.
I'm not complaining about this, you know. It does mean that things are shaping up in a very different complexion. Halfway through, roughly, the fuel window now as Traino works his way onto lap 17 on the stint. As we take a look rearwards from Tanner Watkins, 33 cars took to the green flag. And not, unfortunately, in the traditional 3-wide start that you'll see in a week's time for the 105th running of the Indianapolis 500. Two-wide start here on the iRacing service. And Tanner Watkins, with a slight bobble in through turn 3, has had a bit of a tough day. If we get any sort of an incident, though, all it takes is that one opportunity for people to cycle through. I mean, think about what we saw 7 days ago, Justin, with the fixed 500. A number of cars trying something different on strategy. It just didn't work out in their favor.
Yeah, that's the tough thing when it comes to planning things out, is hoping that you get the luck going your way, but as well executing it. And that's the main thing, is the execution can be so critical when it comes to practicing and trying to figure out, okay, what should we do for this scenario? And right now we're in the scenario where many of the drivers are in that plotting stage, essentially in the midway portion of this race, to figure out, okay, what should we do if this continues to go green? And that's how you have to plan it. You can't factor in there being X amount of caution flags, because you never know if you're going to get that extrapolation amount of caution flags. So it's that intriguing sort of race where you have all that going into mind as we do battle going on for 23rd position.
Valverde very committed on the outside line. Will now try and take a peek to Franzoni, but a little bit too much dirty air. It will be the 17 coming back at him down this back straightaway. Draft on the side. Already 370 kilometers an hour as they dive in towards turn number 3. Think it will be Valverde in the green Team Talent car that just about holds on to that one. And at least for now, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. These are the guys really starting to lose touch of some of the contenders in front of them. Let's turn the attention back to the edge of the top 10. And back to the private label Team Hype machine here. You see Connor Harrington has gone on past Jason Brophy. And they're pulling away from Henry Bennett as well. And this point of the race, Evan, we were talking a little bit earlier about driver fatigue and making sure that you don't burn yourself out. Now, what would you do in this situation? You were almost about to participate in this race before a very late call-up into the RaceSpotTV commentary booth.
Well, and I think it was the better decision to talk about the race and actually participate in it. But my concern more so with that fatigue is when you have those long runs, right? We know that tonight is going to be so critical on your execution. A little bit of a tenth of a second here on pit cycles, and a tenth of a second on a restart here or there. Those are going to be the decisions that ultimately put you in a position to win or take you out of contention to win this iRacing Indy 500. And I think that these drivers aren't going to hate a yellow every 50 laps or so. Now, if it catches you out on strategy, that's going to be where it bites you. But for the most part, I think these drivers are pretty fresh right now, right? 20 some odd laps into the run, about 19 laps since we got back under green flag conditions. As long as you have those little moments to mentally reset, I think these drivers are able to tackle a race if it's a 50-lap sprint and then a 50-lap sprint. So I think everybody looking pretty fresh for the moment. All the incidents we've seen don't appear to be anybody just losing focus. So I think everybody's doing a pretty good job through lap number 480. We'll see if that can continue, depending on how this run continues. As you see, the battle for the race lead is still 6 cars total within a second and a half of each other. Those top 4, though, separated by less than 1 second. Much tighter at this same point in this run than we were, Arjuna, after the opening 20 laps of this race.
It was really the strategy cycle that split things up, if you ask me, as well. So I think that's what we're waiting for. Lap 22 on the stint for the race leaders will be 23 at the line. Across the yard of bricks once more, diving their way into turn 1. Checked up behind Watkins, but still pulling away slightly now as the yellow flies once more. Second time today. It's Pavelski and it's Franzoni that have come together, and I believe it's coming out of turn number 3. Once more on the pit straightaway, cars are stricken, and we go straight to the RaceSpotTV replay machine. Take a look at what happens here, and you'll grab the aftermath of the incident and the cars going ducking and diving, trying to get on through. That's Frank Levick just about squeezing past Franzoni's stricken car there. Justin, take a look at this aerial look that we'll get. What happens here?
It looked like just a little bit of a drift down there for Franzoni, and then as they straighten themselves back out there for the contact, Franzoni just drove it into the outside wall, and it was enough to pin-pawn him to the inside, right where the orange machine of Pawlowski was not what I think they were expecting there coming off the corner exit in that battle for position. Then you see this massive send, just avoiding contact with the wall when the car's in front.
Let's one more look at this. I don't think this really gives you an indication, I'm sure, how terrified the former World Championship driver Frank Levick must have been. Puffs of smoke, check up from Newsom in front, almost loses control, and Franzoni almost coming down into the path there. What a close call that one was, Evan, for Frank Levick. At the tail end of the field, but at least still out there on track.
Just enough time to react, and Franzoni nearly took a couple of drivers with. First, he obviously had the incident there with Pavelski, who was not happy at all on the radio, but then he slid up the hill, almost tagged A.J. Burton, who was able to just sneak through, and then he continued to slide down the hill. Granted, so many tires were off of that car, he really couldn't just lock the brakes and hold it up, and that's why you saw Levick squeeze by on the bottom. That incident could have been a lot worse, but we talk about the former race winners of this event, and Pavelski not going to be a repeat of what happened in 2016. Not happy over the radio, and really the first multi-car incident to that regard we've seen all night, as your race leaders now getting a little bit off cycle. Only 20-some-odd laps since they were last down pit road, but every going to be in this time.
It's going to be a busy place, and just like we saw the last time under caution, will we see a switch around? Oh, there's a car that's sideways into the box. I think that was Jesper Orman potentially in the Three Crowns Racing car. We'll try and get confirmation of that. Oh, mistakes in pit road are so important. Is there any mistakes here off the lane? No change for the race lead. Demerit cycles into 3rd with Nato in 5th. And Connor Harrington, up 3 positions on the day, finds himself in 7th position. Justin, not sure if you isolated which car that was sideways in the pit road.
Not quite sure either, to be honest, so far, but I did see Espity ended up slipping and sliding into his box. You had Joshua Chin overrun part of his pit box. You also had one driver have to back up in Christian Steele. So several different competitors had troubles there. I think it was Steele that you were referring to in particular, who had to back up and then back forward and lost a lot of time after being able to claw his way up inside the top 10. He's been shuffled to 11th.
Let's see if we can pick that up then, because not the first time I've seen a mistake like that. I think we have jumped back not far enough. See if we can go back even further potentially. Under caution for the second time today. There you can see he actually misses his box. And not the ideal angle to go up on the jacks. One more look here, Evan, as you'll see, just slides sideways into the box.
Yeah, it was Valverde who came down to the pit lane running in the number 23 spot, and the way it broke sideways, thought maybe he had a little bit of a touch, but I think he just got a little bit too deep into the pit lane and forgot where his box was for a brief moment. He wasn't really on the brakes until he was at the pit stall immediately before his, and he's very fortunate that he was allowed to get service at that extreme angle. The right rear tire was still hanging out and into the active pit lane, and at the end of the day, it could have been certainly a lot worse. He only spends 10 seconds in the pit stall, so slower than average, but Yeah, that was the mistake there with a 33 car. Could have been a lot worse, but I talk about tenths, and tenth of a second here or there are going to hurt you.
Well, at least it's not as bad as it could have been. He'll still be out there and circulating. Caution flies then for the second time today, and unfortunately for the EG Racing team, a second one of their cars may be done in the action. First, it was Plino Ferreira on lap 56. Before on lap 80, it was Franzoni getting together with previous race winner Matt Pavelski. Now, you're watching the 2021 iRacing Indy 500 live on RaceSpotTV. Delighted to have you along for the ride. The 12th annual Indy 500 here on the iRacing service. So much history behind this event, and it is really special to be in the booth as well. My name is Arjuna Kankipati. Alongside is Evan Pasoko and Justin Prince as well. The voice of the Indy 500 for so long, Will Vincent, is enjoying a well-earned break from commentary duty. So if you're wondering where Will is, well, he's enjoying, I'm sure, probably a bit of well-earned rest and relaxation. Maybe watching on as well. Send him your well wishes on Twitter as well, and hopefully we'll see him back in the booth in 2022. It will be the pace car back down onto the pit road this time around. It is still an Apex Racing Team 1, 2, 3, and 4, but it is Christopher Demerit that has weaseled his way into the podium positions. 5 gained on the day so far. He has looked very strong in the early stages, not even halfway through this race. What can the teammates do at the front? Barney, the flagman, once more has the green flag in his hands. It will be RaceSpot's own Aaron Likens with the green flag in just 7 days' time. Let's wave that green flag then for the third time today and get the action going once more here in Speedway, Indiana. No side-by-side action across the line for the race leaders. They got a very good jump, though, Evan, coming across compared to the rest of the field.
They've been good at that all night long. Those top 4 cars break away just a little bit. They were able to do so much more. As you see, Will Sedato in the number 5 spot. A little bit of a gap between he and then the rest of the drivers. Kraus off of the back end. Harrington, Brophy, the rest of the drivers inside of the top 8. But the guys up front have been pretty calm, but they are side by side. In turn number 3, that's Campbell on the inside of Demerit. He'll make a move to go to P3. I wouldn't be surprised if Constantini makes a move for the race lead this time off of corner number 4. Treno leads to the yard bricks with 115 laps to go. There's the move to the inside.
And as the YouTube chat says, well, we have Barney the flagman, and recently we have Benny the pace car driver as well. Looks like couple of cars falling down the timing sheets. It's Christian Steele. No yellow flag is out. There it is for the third time today. Cautions breed cautions. And it's the Steely rocket machine that finds himself in the wall. He'll be very, very disappointed at how that one has played out. Straight back to the RaceSpotTV replay machine we will go. And it's the 2 purple cars contact into turn 1. I believe that was behind potentially Tanner Watkins as well. One more look at this one, Justin, from the aerial look, and talk us through what you're seeing.
Just trying to run down, and a little bit of contact going into the corner entry there. Steele just to the left rear tire. It ends up in turn being hard enough to, in turn, end up breaking his left front before sliding up into the wall and breaking the whole suspension there. Just unfortunate for Steele as he tried to pinch down just that little extra bit to try and get the run to the outside of Chin.
Well, I just want to jump in and wonder if Austin Espity had a little bit of a factor with that. You can see up the road, Arjuna, you talk about these drivers not wanting to be directly in the wake of the car in front of him. And Espity was single file, but he didn't go on the bottom where you would expect that car to be. So I wonder if that made Steele go a little bit lower into turn number 1. And that may have been why he pinched down on Chin, because just watch Espity up the road a little bit higher. You can see even before the contact, Steele's not quite in line with that outside. And that's why he and Chin end up pinched in that race down to turn 1.
Good call and good spot there was Espity as well. So that wasn't Watkins. Just misread my timing screen. Caution for the third time today. And after a very promising start to the race, it is starting to become a bit more stop and start. But Justin, what we saw 7 days ago was the stop and start in the first 10 laps, and then we basically went almost green until the end. If we get that same sort of a picture from here, the strategy is going to be very, very interesting.
Yeah, and I think one driver may think about rolling the dice here. No, Christopher Demerit nearly hitting the attenuator trying to fake out some drivers, but to get to your point, it's essentially about a 3-stopper on the gas from here, at least. So we'll have to see how things play out. That's based on a 30-30-30 strategy to try and close things on out. But if the attrition continues to build up, it's more and more intriguing in how that plays out. By the way, 2 drivers elected to top off: Tanner Watkins, Riley Thompson to the back of the field.
So there were at least a couple of drivers taking this opportunity to come down onto pit road. For someone like Tanner Watkins, he'll be glad that he's at least back onto the lead lap. Still have the lights on the pace car as well, so at least one more lap here before we'll get back to the green flag action. 33 cars took to the green flag. We are now down to 28 cars still out there on track. And the good news, Evan, is they're all still on the lead lap, so any one of these cars is still in with a chance of victory.
That's the key that I mentioned right off at the top, right? Starting up front makes your life a lot easier, but it is important to be methodical about this passes mid-pack. You're not going to help yourself out making 3 wide moves too early in the race, forcing the issue. The likes of Olsen and Kinsella, mid-pack cars, have worked their way up to the cusp of the top 10 simply by being smart about this race. And there was that question of some of the drivers going a little bit longer, some drivers shorter on the strategy. Would it be 6? Would it be 7 stops? The yellow has put us into a box these last 2. Race leaders not down pit road this time. They just got serviced, so there really isn't an advantage to it. But the lineup to the end of this race, right, with this restart close to about 110 laps to go, makes it a pretty easy call, I would think, that there is no going long enough to eliminate a pit stop. I just don't see trying to stretch to 34, 35 being a positive. I think everybody's going to be right around 30 laps on a run, and that would get everybody basically right to lap number 200 in this race if you make it, I think, what ends up being 3 additional stops. But that is all assuming that this race were to go green. And you talk about the stop, start, and sometimes when you get a couple of yellows like this back-to-back, it's hard to regain that rhythm that we saw earlier on in this race as the lights go back out on top of the iRacing official pace car. And we'll try it again next time by, coming around to take 111 laps to go. We're a long way from home still. Wouldn't be surprised if some of these drivers would hope that this one can start to stretch itself back out.
I think we need that green flag run that we saw earlier. You saw, by the way, Chin talking to his teammates. I think this is that opportunity, Justin. Talk to the rest of your crew. Plan out the rest of this race now, because there is every chance we could go green to the end. And just like what I was saying slightly earlier, working backwards is going to be oh so important.
Yeah, and as mentioned, if you work backwards right now from this point forward, it's going to be where we're talking about pit stops again as late as potentially 10, 15 laps to go. So we may see drivers roll the dice again at about 20 laps into the run and say, you know what, let's try and get through the field by trying an undercut call and trying to gamble on that count. It's going to be intriguing now how this all plays out overall, Arjuna, to see how things fare out on the fuel.
Still a long way to go, like Evan said. Great to see family members getting involved in the YouTube chat as well. Glad to have you here on RaceSpotTV. As always, the month of May is such an exciting time for all of our team, and we're delighted to have coverage not just of the Fixed 500 7 days ago, but this 12th annual iRacing Indy 500, part of the inaugural iRacing World Tour. All the way back in 2010, it has taken on a life of its own, and history continues to be written here in Speedway, Indiana. At the front, it is still Apex Racing Team leading us to the green flag. But look at this, Brandon Trainer with a statement coming across the line. Here comes Zach Campbell as well, Evan, to try and get into second position.
Yeah, they're going to both team up and make that pass on Costantini. It was Treno first to the inside in the run to turn number 1, and Zach Campbell with that bold move, a late dive, but he ends up third. Here's the counter punch now. Costantini back down to the inside and around for the race lead. These race leaders are probably those that would benefit the most from this race stretching back out onto a green flag run, but they're racing just as aggressively as anybody else in the field is right now.
I almost wonder if these guys are being even more aggressive at this point, because they know that track position is going to be so important. Swapping as well, that's going to be what potentially pulls them away, as see Christopher Demerit running a slightly higher line. Check in the mid-pack where there is some side-by-side action. It's almost too wide, too deep. The Canadian Andrew Kinsella defends from Andrew Wood in the Team Talent 21 with Chad Simpson and Liam Quinn side-by-side behind them. Liam Quinn in 17th position, 3 positions gained on the day. Chad Simpson, it's a number of drivers here in the mid-pack, Justin, that have worked their way up almost 10 positions, and Simpson is up 8 on the day so far.
Nice solid day for Simpson after not the best of qualifying runs with how tight things were in the session, but it's going to take a little bit of work to get back up to wood now, close back up, get the draft, and try and close into the rest of the groupings, because that air wash is starting to really come into factor where drivers are trying to run the 4th line, in fact, all the way up as high as they can, like Alexis Newsom is at the moment. Newsom really just trying to wheel it very high up on the racetrack, trying to find a way on by Adam Crane.
Also defending from Johan Hart, who's trying to charge back through the field. The Frenchman looks to the inside of Newsom, almost sends the slide job in through turn 3, but through the short chute, Newsom will hold on. At the line, it is still going to be Michele Costantini, and at the yard of bricks, it was 100th between the two of them. It is so close, and if we had that drag race to the line on lap number 200, I think you want to be the car that's leading out of turn number 4. It's what we saw 12 months ago with Brandon Traino taking victory as well, Evan.
Yeah, and he used a little bit of blocking there to protect his line in that run to the yard of bricks. Just one movement. That's typically considered okay. It's when you start putting second and third moves where you get into a little bit of gray area, but Traino just adjusted his line off of the final corner, just made that car in second think about it for a moment, and was able to go on to win his second consecutive iRacing Indy 500. But Newsom made that outside move in 4. That's been pretty aggressive. Your race leaders going at it again as Traino back down on the inside to make the pass on Costantini, and these top 2 cars, again, they've been swapping it out all night. I don't really think that they are the ones that I'm a little bit surprised by on the aggressiveness. Some of the margins when they make these dives to the inside, they're really waiting to the end and just asking for a slight slip up. I'd give each other a little bit more room at this point in the race, but they've been pretty much in sync, so I'm not really worried about those two. But Campbell up into the mix here, Demerit dropping back down to 4th. They got a Wilson Nato in the number 5 spot, just hanging tight. We have finally gotten that separation on the start of the race. I mentioned we saw those top 4, top 5 breakaway so as we watched the battle for 19th. On the previous run, we did not see that. Your race leaders had a much better jump this time. Intervals left-hand side of your screen. Those race leaders would really enjoy, I think, this to be the run that goes green, because they were much well-coordinated, better coordinated maybe than they were the last couple of times.
And Justin, take a look at the face of Johan Hart now, starting to get a little bit more intense, if you ask me now. Not towards frustration, I don't want to necessarily use that word, but I think the realization of how much hard work there is still to do, and we are approaching the halfway point of this race.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy to get back up there, because one of the things emphasized by his teammate Zach Campbell was they put in a ton of work into qualifying because they knew the importance of being up at the front. And in turn, we've seen that execution with qualifying. Now, he doesn't have that benefit. Now, it's to where he's dealing with a lot of the air wash, and that is the big equalizer for how some of this could play out. And the cars are so close in terms of the performance we talked about earlier that it's not going to be easy to make his way back through the pack unless he gets some good pit stop execution, but as well, just plays things out near to perfection. And right now, the tough thing is, there's that bubble that's hard to burst to try and close in fully to get yourself side by side. He's been trying to dive lower than these drivers you're following along with the battle of 19th position, and it just hasn't been working quite yet in 1 and 3, but has been for turns 2 and 4 as Hart will actually drive right on by Newsom because Newsom nearly slammed into the wall.
Newsom lost so much momentum. I was worried she might even lose the position to Adam Crane, so slips out of the top 20. And the iRacing Rallycross World Champion, only 16 positions down then on the day so far. We are still a long way to go, and as John Roberts had pointed out in the YouTube chat, this is a 500-mile race, not 499, not 501, not potentially more as well. There was some controversy last year, Evan, when we had the way the race ended in the real world, where caution came out with Oliver Askew's huge incident, and I'm not going to try and just paint such a broad brush here, but it was some of the NASCAR fans wondering, why not a green, white, checkered? It's a 500-mile race, and I must say I love that commitment to not going further than that distance.
Well, as a NASCAR guy as well, right? I think it's important for me to recognize as well, extending races for overtime is very exclusively in relative terms a NASCAR thing, right? Of course, at the Indianapolis 500, you'll see drivers going as a little bit of a puff of smoke there for Orman up the road as we continue to watch the battle. Crane to the inside of Newsom here. This is all for about 19th position on back, but you do have your three wide starts for the initial start, but then single file and strings it out from there on back. That allows, I think, these drivers to be much more precise with their strategy, right? I don't think you would have seen an Alexander Rossi push his fuel to the exact number and maybe a little bit short in retrospect, right? Coasting to the win at the 100th running of the 500 a couple of years ago. I don't think you would see drivers making those kind of calls if there was a possibility of having to go past lap number 200. So I'm a fan of it. I don't mind keeping it at 200 laps set, no shorter, no longer.
And again, I'm not trying to attack anyone here, because I think the overtime thing, it produces its own sort of action, but it's two different motorsports and they work slightly differently as well. And so it was an interesting kind of couple of weeks in the aftermath of that race, reading a lot of the opinions and being part of the Twitter conversation as well. There was contact, I do believe, between Orman and Johan Harth there. Don't know if it's necessarily slowed the Swede so much, but enabled the Frenchman to slip on through, and he's now attacking the back of Andreas Ake for 18th position. Turn the attention back up front here, Justin, and you'll see the gaps really are starting to develop once more.
Well, that's because the swap draft is starting to come back into play from the top two, and that's what helped them break away in the first place. Once they were able to break the draft, especially after pit stops, by 4 seconds, they were able to grow that by about a tenth a lap by doing exactly that, and it's well-coordinated work that they're doing. Trano mentioned it earlier before this race, where he wanted to put himself in the best position to win. And right now, he and that 13 feel this is their best position to win, is continue to go back and forth, swap, and work together to try and pull away from Campbell. And they're starting to break the toe. They picked up 3/10 the past few laps.
I wonder if the last lap was maybe even worse, because seeing someone like Jason Brophy's in the 8th position, fastest lap last time around at 49.53. That's almost a full tenth quicker than the race leaders. We're watching the focus on Costantini across the yard of bricks. He will come, looking rearwards now as Trano pulls to the inside. Swaps once more, and just the briefest of glance to the side there, Evan. He's just looking to make sure his teammate is clear. He knows exactly how much he needs to turn in and when he can do so.
And I'd mentioned in sync between these two, right? I mean, some of the moves I would maybe pull out a little bit sooner than these guys are. You don't want to risk just being too close to somebody in a contact error or something, negatively affect you. But these guys could almost know without looking, right, when that driver's going to make the move on them, when they're going to be clear, when you have to turn into the corner. So that slight glance is just for a little bit of reassurance. Trano and Costantini are very well in sync on what the plan is here. Now, if that was not your teammate making a move to the inside, I think you'd be a little bit more weary on checking the mirrors. When's he going to turn in? Where's he going to clear me? Should I cross over here? Do I wait to halfway down the back straightaway like you'll see them two swap it out again this time by? So that slight glance tells me they are very comfortable with one another. Now, at some point, we don't give a trophy to first and second, our junior. These two will turn on each other at some point. But it is just like super speedway racing and NASCAR, same way with most of the oval stuff on the IndyCar side as well. You do want a little bit of support, and these two have played a perfect game thus far. They're not probably going to worry about fighting against one another until we get to maybe the final 5 laps of the race. You start thinking about setting it up on when you want to make a move. But these passes for the race lead are not really a battle for the lead. This is that in-sync work. You talk about the switch draft between these two, and very much a coordinated effort that has continued despite some possible hiccups with caution flags and pit stops, trying to interject some other drivers into the mix, even other teammates as well that would love to be swapping out for first and second spot. These two have been picture perfect thus far through 105 laps.
Left side once more. We'll scroll through the movers and shakers. And I was talking to some of the Apex Racing teammates in the build-up to the race, and I don't think it's such a ludicrous question, if you ask me. Traino is on the precipice of not just iRacing history, iRacing immortality. It took 10 years. It took 10 years before we got a repeat victor in this race. To see someone do it not once, not twice, but 3 times as the caution flies for the 4th time in today's action. And it's because i5G's Apex i5G driver AJ Burden has had some sort of an issue, and it's involving Tanner Watkins as well. Oh, well, that changes the game then in terms of pit stop strategy. Justin, take a look at this one.
And a bit of a push-up is coming up right there. My goodness, that's Valverde that ends up getting into him that time, right underneath him, and just washed up the track. Quite simply as that, right underneath.
Not the first time we've seen Team Talon and i5G come together, and for the 2nd time in a row, Valverde just upped the track oh so slightly. And for Tanner Watkins there, Evan, after recovering very nicely from the drama earlier in today's action, that might be day done for the OpenWheels.com owner.
Yeah, check that out right there. Almost made it on through as we saw Burton spin up and into the outside wall, and he just got him with the right rear, ripped the right rear tire clean off of that number 26 machine, and sent Watkins for a spin, and he is forced to tow. His night is done, loses the right front of the car as well. Watkins destroyed, and that's a move that I don't think we see happen. That incident doesn't happen at lap 5, but it does at lap 105, and that move onto the inside. Early in this race, we saw if you weren't almost all the way clear, you were backing out of that on the inside and allowing that driver up top to go for the defensive line, which has worked pretty successful in a lot of the battles tonight. But that driver's just starting to force the issue more as we get into the second half of the race. Not something we would have seen in the first half. I don't know if this hurts our strategy that much, though. We'll be down pit road, and this restart will be very close to lap number 90. I think we're still very much in sync for 30-lap stints, and after this, maybe only 2 more stops to the end.
I think you're right there, Evan. If anything, it's now split this instead of a 33-lap magic number. It's the 30-lap magic number, so it's just slightly easier. Less fuel saving on the mind of the drivers. Once more, a very important trip down onto pit road here. Lap 107 out of 200. The iRacing 2021 Indy 500. We've already seen swap-arounds for the lead in pit road. Will it happen once more? Up on the jets, they all go. Waiting for Johan Harth to finally cycle his way down into the box. Costantini will get out in front of Traino. Demerit in front of Campbell as well. No changes then in the top 10. Might see some swap-arounds, for positions 10 through 15. I think Hugo Olsen has lost about 3 different positions there, Justin. He's now down in 16th spot, exiting pit road.
And not the best pit execution. Had a bit of a longer pit stop lane time overall. I lost him all that sequence of time, so it's continuing to start to pile up a little bit now for him. Was 13th or so coming to the start and finish line, and in part it was because he had to back up into his pit box, overshot his pit box, so that's why he lost so much time.
And people think that entering pit lane is easy. It is not easy, Evan. You take out so much downforce. Relative. You've got some downforce when you come to Indy, but it's about that balance, right? How much can you be able to work in the dirty air? How fast can you go in clean air as well? And so when you get onto the brakes with no downforce to help you, sometimes you just lock them up and you slide in through your box. So it's something that drivers definitely practice in the build-up to this race.
Yeah, oftentimes you refer to it as, how trimmed out are these cars? Because, you talk about the qualifying effort. If you want to be up in this top split, you do need those top Q times. And it is a struggle enough to be one of the fastest drivers in an Indy car at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on your own. Then you need to decide, at least in this race, 6,500, a decision's made a little bit more for you, and you have limited tools to work with. But for this race, it really is up to you. Do you want to be the fastest car that's on the ragged edge, or would you rather be a little bit more comfortable making some moves and, maybe a more stable race car underneath you while trading out a little bit of that trimmed outness and giving yourself a little bit more downforce, which will, in effect, slow you down. So those are the decisions that these drivers have made pre-race, and they can make some limited adjustments over the course of the race, but there is a balance. Would you rather be the fastest car and the most unstable, or would you be a little bit more stable and a little bit slower? There is no magic answer. If there was, Arjuna, everybody would have the same set strategy and same ratio, if you will, and they would all be on the same call. So there is no perfect answer. There is no one winning recipe, and at the end of the day, the thing that makes up for all of it is what the driver does from behind the wheel.
And Justin, I mean, you've got two voices of the eNASCAR Coca-Cola Series in the booth with me here today. Last week, we saw Casey Kerwin in action in the fixed setup race here. What do you think the difference is between an open wheel car, slicing and dicing around the oval versus, the big behemoth that is a stock car? Because dirty air is still the name of the game, but it's different in how you try and mitigate the effects of it.
That's actually a good question, because there are plenty of differences when it comes to racing stock car versus open wheel, where it's different in terms of how you drive it, in terms of your throttle inputs, in terms of how they race in general, because dirty air when it comes to a stock car can make it difficult to really close up to the bubbles, similar to that in an open wheel car, but in a different way, where it can force you to really get tight with when you really get up on somebody. So there's a lot of differences, but that's a big time discussion as these drivers look for the big time restart.
And once more, it looks like coordination between the teammates out front. They've got a great jump on Nato, and Campbell straight down to the inside in towards turn number 1. Green flag back out then in the 2021 iRacing Indy 500. As we are working lap 110 into the final couple of pit stops then. We go green till the end. It might just be 2 more trips down onto the lane as, well, once more, swap drafting resumes at the front of the field, Evan.
Yeah, I don't know if Christopher Demerit is a little bit out of sync with the rest of the guys up front, or if it's the driver just not willing to force the issue, but that's the second time tonight that he has gained positions on pit road to go to third and then immediately lost it. The last run dropped back to fourth and never really challenged back for that spot. Campbell up the road holds on to third for the moment, and I think Demerit needs to be more concerned with Nato behind than it does with gaining a position. He's high in 1 and 2. Nato closes the gap. Not sure if he's going to be within striking distance to go for the move on the back straightaway, but Demerit early in these runs just doesn't seem to be as crisp as some of those other cars, and it continues to cost him in the opening, I'd say, 5 laps after the green flag.
And well, Justin, I think people think that, there's so many teammates in this race, they must be all using the same setup and et cetera, et cetera. Not the case at all, especially at a track which is so driver dependent. Like Indy, you really need to wrangle the maximum performance out of the car. You'll be making slight tweaks, not just to the setup, but in your in-car tools as well. You've got the front and rear ARBs and that weight jacker as well to just move some weight around the car.
Yeah, it all comes down to preference, because it takes a lot of setup knowledge, first of all, to be able to build the cars in the first place. And when it comes to Indianapolis, it's not a one-size-fits-all type of deal. You need to be able to know what you need to adjust to give the right balance you want to have. Do you want it to be a bit more snappy off the corner? Do you want it to where it's a bit more snugger so you don't have a tire slide? You need to think about all those factors, and then you have the in-car tools to utilize, where you're trying to constantly adjust them to make sure you don't snap around the corner exits as well, to make sure that you also have that balance exactly where you want it to be. And don't forget the downforce levels. Drivers take out a lot of it to try and build it up to where it's most comfortable for them. And sometimes drivers are more comfortable with a bit more downforce for the corners. Some like to have it very trimmed out. So it's all a massive discussion level where having teammates helps you as someone to be able to lean on and get advice from, and have someone to ask for reference points to. But overall, if you want to succeed here, you need to know how to be able to build.
Down to the inside, here comes Jesper Orman trying to get on past Andreas Ake. That was close between the two of them. A bit too close if you ask me, and Orman washes up the track now, has to do it all over again, build up his momentum. Checking back out front, you can see it's still Apex Racing Team 1, 2, and 3 with Demerit in 4th. Wilson Nato, quiet night so far here, but Evan, for a driver that is always so strong in qualifying, to be in the top 5 with 90, 85 laps still to go. He knows that if he's been doing the fuel games that we think he's been playing, he'll be in the strongest position come the last 30 laps.
Yeah, and he's kind of at the back of those drivers who've been able to hold strong, right? At one point, it was the top 12 who really didn't go anywhere. Then it was the top 10, and now it's the top 6 that have held strong, right? He runs exactly where he started in 5th, and so does Philip Cross behind him by about 0.4 of a second in the number 6 spot. But when you get there on the back, Brophy's up 2, Harrington, Bennett +2, Lichtenberg up 6 spots, Kinsella up 11. I mean, that mid-pack area just outside of the top 6 is where all those Chargers have been. So NATO, one of the last stalwarts of the drivers who have been able to maintain track position, and sometimes being quiet and not talked about is a good strategy. Because a lot of the drivers that we've talked about have been drivers who made mistakes on pit road, dropped to the back of the pack. Harth, a good example of that, who, by the way, left-hand side of your screen, back there on the timing, up to P15, so his charge back through the field is progressing, but obviously, with time starting to wind down, 84 laps to go the next time by, still has some work to do, but sometimes goes to show that if we don't talk about you in the opening 100 laps of the race, not necessarily the worst of things as we go on board with the 19 of Alexis Newsom.
And look at that, Justin, 13 positions gained on the day, and while Harth is climbing his way through the field, he's bringing Alexis Newsom along for the ride as well, and I'm not 100% sure on this, so I don't want to sound like I'm a know-it-all, but I think this is the first time we have a woman in the top split on the broadcasted day of the iRacing Indy 500. So it's great to see an increasingly diverse community forming around this car. It's already such a global community. You think about drivers from all across the globe competing today. Great to have some female representation as well.
Absolutely, and it shows the growth of iRacing as a whole, I think, to where more and more drivers are trying to show and utilize what they can do on the service, and it's opening up opportunities for drivers from all different types of backgrounds and genders and locations where anyone can learn how to drive and, with the right connections, be one of the most successful drivers in the service. And Newsom had some struggles in the fixed race, keep in mind. Had that trouble at the very end of the race last week. But this race has just kept it nice and patient, and it's done a very good job. It's just a matter now of getting back up to Hart and trying to take advantage when Hart tries to cut his way by Hugo Olsen and Andrew Wood up here.
And, for someone like you, Evan, you've seen so many different people emerging in World Championship competition. Alexis Newsom is very, very new to iRacing, less than 12 months on the service, but I was mentioning this to Connery, I think, a couple of days ago. Almost reminds me of what we saw from Sebastian Jobe. He started on a Monday night skippies. It's something we do in RaceSpotTV for the UK community. He started there, and Connery got to commentate on him in Skip Barber cars. Now a World Championship winner. It took him a while, from the age of 13 all the way till about 21, his current age, but just that evolution. It's something that for so many of these drivers, they don't get, any sort of potential chance to do that in the real world. iRacing gives them that opportunity.
Yeah, in a perfect world, iRacing is step one on a ladder to eventually fight and compete in real racing. And Newsom just about put it in the wall there. But, you made a point earlier with all the World Championship Series that I've been able to cover. And, I talked about the nerves and the fact that, well, yes, it may be ex-drivers' first time in this top split. Why drivers' first time at a World Championship? Doesn't mean that they aren't experienced in the sim, right? In most cases, these drivers have careers spanning multiple years. But what we've seen over the last, I think, 2 or 3 years on the surface is this new iRacer, somebody who, hasn't necessarily been racing in sim or arcade, racing titles over the course of the last decade or so. They get involved because they enjoy the idea of competitive sim racing, and they get into it with that goal set in mind. And we're seeing now more than ever drivers who are able to get to some of the top levels after just a year or two behind the seat, when previously the only drivers you would ever see in a top split race like this or a World Championship Series were the drivers who had been doing it for the better part of a decade.
And such a boon having, I think, so many more people coming onto the iRacing surface. Obviously, no one wanted to be shut down for 12 months, but iRacing has taken that and really run The IRA team has seen a number of improvements over the last 12 months as well. New tire model, new damage model as well. Really has, I think, invigorated the community and perked things up. Qualifying was a very interesting week. 5-day grind. I mean, it's unlike what they're going through in the real world now, Justin, where it's 2 days, 3 attempts, and every time you head out there, you lose your previous run. You get 90 individual sessions on the iRacing service, once an hour, to head out there for a single 4-lap run. There is less pressure, I would say, to nail the run every single time you go out there onto track, but there's more pressure knowing that you start to run out of attempts as you go later into the week.
Yeah, and especially when you don't execute right from the get-go, it makes it to where, okay, we need to go back to the shop and go back into testing to be able to find things out, because that's one of the main things when it comes to iRacing 2 is there are tons and tons of hours of testing when it comes to the preparation, especially for qualifying and for this race, to make sure you have the right car and leave no stones unturned, because speed. And it takes a lot of patience, but it also, for a lot of the bigger organizations, it takes a lot of resources in turn to utilize them. And for some of the smaller organizations, it shows just how much of an accomplishment it can be to get up here, to be able to put in all that work and effort and have the people who know exactly what needs to be tuned for things to work in what situation. So it takes a lot of work overall, Arjuna, to get yourself into that position.
And that's what the great thing about the Fixed 500 is, if you ask me. It was great that last year, with so many people stuck at home, that we had that opportunity to put everyone on a level playing field, remove the engineering challenge that obviously is an integral part of the challenge here at Indy. You take one factor out, leave it all in the control of the drivers. Equal chances, drivers in control of their destiny. That's what I said 7 days ago, and it was Philip Kraus that put himself into the driver's seat and took victory there. 2 seconds adrift, and never say never, as the Team Talent driver supremely confident in the month of May. He started off the first weekend with a second-place finish in the season opener of the ISO WC. Had to fight for it. He qualified on second. At one point fell all the way back, I think it was to 8th position, and a pass around the toe on the outside of Johan Harth. That's just incredible to see how Kraus fought his way back up through the field. So much confidence I think that gave him to come here to the Brickyard and put in a very impressive qualifying performance. I mean, so many Apex Racing cars at the front, and it was Nato, it was Kraus, and it was Tanner Watkins that really were the standout qualifying performers. Other than them, Jason Brophy as well, who's doing quite well to be tucked up right behind Philip Kraus. Still swap drafting. It will be 75 laps to go, with 74 at the line this time around. And in terms of our predictions here, Evan, it's still really anyone's game, I'd say.
But of course, I went for the low-hanging fruit. It's not a difficult decision to, pick the pole sitter. As statistically speaking, not the safest of choices. Like I said, I'm surprised that we've gone through 11 iterations of this iRacing Indy 500 without the pole sitter getting the win. You can see the benefits of it. You've got the likes of, Kinsella, who's picked up big, up 12 spots. We talked about Newsom up 13, Ormond up 10, a little bit further back of the pack. But it is not a guarantee, but I still think that I need to see more. And again, Campbell, Demerit, we talked about NATO in 5th, who's just been quietly lurking and maybe save it a little bit more than everybody else. That could benefit come the end of the race if he wants to make a little bit of a different decision on the pit strategy should this go green. Not that those drivers are going 110%, nobody is. But it just seems like consistently on the long run and through the pit cycle, I think is going to be big. If we can get to another cycle, I need to see more out of somebody else. Otherwise, I think it's going to come down to this 3 and the 13. Now, I wonder, Arjuna, if everybody else learned that overcut or staying out a little bit longer than the leaders doesn't help you on the back end. You're going to lose 4 seconds and you'll gain a half a second back, right? It's just not worth it. If we get to green flag pit stops, which should be in about 10 to 12 laps or so for these race leaders, if we get to that point, again, we're talking about trying to get to our magic numbers, and if you want to get to 200, you're thinking 170 and you're thinking 140, so they're going to have to stretch a little bit longer than if that previous yellow hadn't happened. I just wonder if these guys learned, can they do anything? Because if we get a green flag cycle and it is anything like that first one we saw, Treno and Constantini going to be well synced up. If they get to a 4-second advantage, it's going to be awfully difficult without the assistance of a yellow at a restart to get to them. So I'm liking my pick. You can call it the low-hanging fruit, but I think I was going against the stats. So I'm happy with rolling the dice on my call.
I mean, it would be history-making, right, if the pole position sitter actually took victory here today as well. It's going to be tough, though, and I mean, what we saw in November, Justin, at the Open Wheels 500, the last huge Indy 500 we've had here on the iRacing service, if you ask me, it was kind of a similar thing where we had 2 or 3 cars break away at the front of the field, slightly longer in terms of the green flag run. And once you got yourself in the position that you were in control, it was very much just making sure you were in the fight at the end. Same thing is playing out here, I think. If you are anyone from about 7th on back, you know that it's very hard to make moves happen. The best you can do is stay where you are and try and make something happen in the pit window like we saw on that first green flag run.
That is near word for word exactly what Brendan Trano told me earlier today, where you need to be there at the end, because at the end, it can be anybody's race. We've seen, in the past few years in particular, close final lap passes. Lots of dicing back and forth, a lot of squeezing back and forth. You never know if there's going to be attrition that can build into play in the final lap, or mistakes that can come into play. So essentially, it's that matter of position yourself to be up at the very front of the field. And so far, Treno and Constantini have done exactly that for this race. Campbell's also in a decent spot, but the tough part is Campbell's got the aero wash for both these cars, especially in the corners. So it's been difficult to get closing on in. So it's now to where the top 2, I think, are in a great position. They've been the top 2 this entire day. They've been the dominant contenders all day. It's just a matter of executing it to the very end.
And as you can now see on the left-hand side of your screen, I mean, we're going through a phase of the race where basically only the leaders are going side by side. Everyone else is separated by at least a couple of tenths of a second. It's been about 6 minutes, counting, since we've seen any other sort of swap for positions so far. And at the line, it will be 132 laps done here in Speedway, Indiana, the 2021 iRacing Indy 500, and we are entering that magic pit stop window. Left side of the screen will now cycle through to the stint length, and based on what we saw in that first run under green flag conditions, Evan, it could be Costantini and Treno down in just 3 laps' time onto the pit road.
Yeah, they can come in on the number, right, just a little bit shy of 30, but then they would have to go a little bit longer for their second 2, right? So if they come in after 30 laps on the tires, granted, keep in mind, they got tires under the yellow, so that's not 25 laps under green, more likely 23 laps under green flag conditions. So if you go 7 more laps, then you're right on the money, right? You're going to pit with 60 laps to go, you're going to do another 30 laps, pit with 30 laps to go, and you're going to be right on the money to go to the end of this race. Now, that would imply going all the way, and if we were to stretch this race out to the end of the green flag conditions, it would be the longest green flag run of the night. So the odds would suggest we're not done with yellows. So do we see somebody else stay out a little bit longer, maybe knowing that that's not necessarily going to be the winning strategy long run, but hoping that, if you're 7 seconds back in 15th position right now, like Johan Harth, you ran up front, you made a mistake, you didn't try to recover forward. You really don't get much, I think, out of finishing 15th in this race. You know you have the speed to win it. Do you try to go a little bit off cycle just to catch something, right? Just to shake things up. The leaders, I think it's pretty clear. You're going to pit basically right at or a little bit shy of lap 140. I just wonder if drivers further back want to maybe stretch the fuel as long as you can go and get a benefit. I don't think the undercut helps much either. In retrospect, we talk about how you don't win much or gain much on the leaders, Virginia, based on what we've learned on the green flag cycles earlier tonight by pitting later than them. I don't really think you're going to gain much from pitting earlier than them, because everybody else who pitted earlier when we got that first yellow of the race got stuck a lap down and have struggled to recover from that. So if you are comfortable with I would not be surprised if your top 5 basically all come down very close to one another. But if you're in the teens, I wonder if you're at that point yet, or maybe you'll save that for that final cycle of pit service if we stay green for another 40.
Such an interesting strategy battle that is playing out here live on RaceSpotTV. Justin, something that I haven't gotten to do yet, so I'm making a point to do it now, is breaking out the RaceSpotTV telestrator. There you can see those are 3 very important numbers that the driver is always looking at. You see the 2 red boxes. Those are your ARB settings, the front and rear, how much turn you are trying to get each of the ends of the car to really rotate around. Then that 3rd number is the weight jacker, and of course the weight that you can shift from one axis of the car to the other portion of the car. Then the one to the right of it that I've slightly missed out there, that is your fuel map. These are all crucial driver-dependent settings. Unfortunately, we don't get the ability to peek on in because that would be a slightly competitive advantage for the competitors to see what their various competitors are doing. But for drivers, those are 4 numbers they are always keeping their eyes on.
Yeah, all those numbers are very critical to make sure you're adjusting properly, and it's like in real life where those knobs end up turning those various adjustments to be able to go around to make sure you have everything properly tuned. And those numbers are going to be different from various positions of back and how you are in air wash compared to, say, in the clean air. As someone's taking a gamble here. Hugo Olsen is saying, you know what, let's try going for the undercut.
So the young Swede down onto pit road then. Watch for this stop. He cannot afford to make a mistake like he did the last time. He's quite to the right-hand side if you ask me, but up on the jacks he goes. 4 fresh Firestone tires going on to the number 11 car. Relatively quick pit stop as well, just 8.2 seconds as Olsen rolls off then down back onto the track. Riley Thompson follows him in as well. There comes the race leaders, Evan. Olsen is going to come out right in the thick of the pack.
He's going to be right in the middle of them. Your race leaders coming through turn number 1. You'll see them cycle past here on the short chute. They're going to go up to the outside, allow him to make that arc to make that access road at speed. And this is the risk, right? So the undercut is the better call, I think, all night. We saw the drivers who tried to go for the overcut. It didn't pay off. The undercut will gain time in the long run because the race leaders are out here running lap times in the mid to low 41s, 41.2s, 41.3s. For a few laps, at least, those drivers who just pitted going to be in the high 40s. So they will make up time. But this is the gamble, as if there's a yellow, they're going to be stuck a lap down. Your race leaders, though, are down pit road right on the money, like I was thinking. 139 crossing to 140, and those top 2 down in tandem, Treno and Costantini.
I'm a little bit worried. I saw the puff of smoke, and I just think back to November and the mistake that Costantini made coming down onto pit road, desperate to try and make whatever he could happen down on the lane. Treno has missed his box and has to reverse back into his stall to get his service done, so Costantini might roll off several seconds in front here, Justin.
Still able to come out decently well, but that tire spin's going to cost him at least an extra car length plus, so I think it could have been worse, but for Treno was able to quickly recover. It appears here 9.9 for Costantini, 9.5 for Treno in the pit box.
If that was the other way around, Arjuna, that was going to be a lot worse, right? If that was the trailing car who made the mistake, that was going to be the driver who the onus was on to draft up to the car in front, right? You make that mistake, you go from being in sync to 1 car 2 seconds back. Treno is very lucky that he was the lead car, because he would have been ahead of Costantini through the pit cycle. So while this does cost him time, moving the front car behind the trailing car is a lot more forgiving than that trailing car falling off of the back end. So certainly could have been a lot worse.
Very good point there. There you see Brophy Bennett and Espity off of the lane. Puffs of smoke. Pit road exceptionally busy. Kinsella, Lichtenberg, Nato, Kraus, and company down on the lane. Demerit and Zach Campbell are still extending the lead of this race right now. I'm very interested at the strategy. They are working lap 34 and counting. And Zach Campbell is trying to get down onto pit road this time around. He's got the message through to Austin Espity and company. Watch now, though, Evan, as we see the rest of the cars rolling their way off of pit road.
And this is plenty of service. There's a dozen drivers on pit road right now, and for the most part, they all look pretty clean as they'll blend back up and into traffic. Nato, the lead car off of pit road. Kraus, Harrington. You got Bennett in the mix as well. Kinsella, Lichtenberg, and other drivers cycling back through. DeBarrett in this time. There is the number 1 car pitting for the race lead. Zach Campbell down pit road. So is Johan Harth. And in the blink of an eye, that is everybody. And Brandon Treno and Constantini will cycle back to the top of the board. You'll see them come off of turn number 4. It may look for a moment like these cars on the pit lane have the opportunity to best them, but I would think that Treno will cycle through. We'll have to watch just to be certain. There they are in turns 1 and 2, and they will cycle by everybody. Demerit on the inside of turn 2, the best of the challenges, but it is not enough. He'll do pretty good. He'll end up 3rd on this cycle, but Treno and Constantini, even with that slight mistake on pit road, dodge a big bullet, and they cycle back to 1 and 2 now in the second to last run of this race.
Campbell has lost time in the pit road, except the time in the lane has just about matched his teammates in front, so not sure exactly what happened to the young Georgian, who now finds himself 1 and a bit seconds adrift from the podium, but Demerit slots right back into the draft. 5 positions gained on the day for a previous race winner, hunting down his 2 teammates in front of him. 1 pit stop is left on the cars, and on the left-hand side of your screen, we will cycle through the positions gained there. Justin, I don't know if anyone really took full advantage of the pit stop cycle that last time around.
Yeah, it looked like, for the most part, fairly standard in terms of how things turned out. Even Hugo Olsen only gained maybe 1, maybe 2 positions at the very most in the pit stop sequence. Outside of that, though, look at Andrew Kinsella amongst your big movers now of 12 positions right in front of this grouping.
Here's Hugo Olsen. Like Justin said, he actually did cycle up about 3 positions, I think, so undercut did work in his favor. As I see Riley Thompson is back down onto the pit road. I'm not exactly sure what happened to the Total Downforce Racing driver there. In terms of movers and shakers, though, it's gone from one power slide driver to the other one here, Evan, with now Andrew Kinsella, the biggest of our movers, 12 positions gained on the day so far, and working his way up into the top 10 here. It'll be interesting to see what he can do now in the next 50 laps here.
Yeah, and that wasn't positions gained just because of an undercut. In fact, he pitted later than some of the drivers, a little bit earlier than some, but was on the later half. So that's just on consistency and speed for the Power Slide Motorsports entry. Also, just to bookend that note on Zach Campbell, right, almost dropping out of the battle for the race lead, I think he's going to be okay. He's within a second of those 3 funning ahead of him, so I think it could have been a lot worse for Campbell. But based on the lap times, he lost all that time almost exclusively on his cycle onto pit road. So the lap in which he pitted was a 52.3. You compare that to the likes of Demerit, who was only 51.5 seconds on that lap. So that 0.8 of a second difference is all the time he lost, and I'm willing to bet that was almost exclusively on pit road entry. We saw a lot of drivers locking it up. Our junior right on the limit to pit road speed of 60 miles an hour. He was down to as low as 52 miles an hour onto pit road. So much more conservative. That's where it cost him the time. Luckily for him, doesn't appear to be fatal. Here's the onboard look with him. He's back within 0.8 of a second, and he'll be back fighting for the race lead. Yeah, well and truly in the draft. And I think important that you make that, I don't want to say it's a mistake, Justin, but you get your conservatism, whatever the word is there, out of your system before that final stop, because if we get green flag pit stops in that final cycle of the race, you can't afford to do what Campbell did that last time around.
And you know what's one of the most practiced parts of this event, as well as any NASCAR, for the comparison's sake, between stock cars and open wheel again? Pit road entry. Because you need to know the exact limitations and gain confidence to be able to build it up. You don't practice that, it costs you upwards of a couple seconds for some drivers in some circumstances. So if you don't put in that preparation several times, saying, you know what, let's go full speed for a few laps, see how it feels to enter the pit lane on this set of tires, on a full stint set of tires, then it's going to be very difficult to be able to properly get yourself to get that time. So you need to put in that preparation too of, okay, how aggressive can I be to get to that commitment cone?
Still swapping for the race lead, and someone in the YouTube chat has pointed out here that Treno is looking odds-on potentially to make it 3 wins in a row. At the very least for the Apex Racing team, they might be on the cards for 3 in a row as well. they'll be chasing on their fellow teammate Scott McLaughlin in a week's time, as he'll hopefully be in the field for the 105th running of the Indianapolis 500. We whittled down 1,000 plus drivers into just the fastest 33. In the real world, it's only a couple of cars that are going to be bumped, but it's always such a tense moment, Evan, I'm sure, sitting there on pit road waiting for those final runs to happen and knowing that if someone manages to nail that lap, you are going to be watching on from the sidelines.
And part of me was thinking, what stings more, right? In real life Indianapolis 500 qualifying, if there's less drivers that get bumped, but if you get bumped, you don't make the show, right? They don't run a second split of the Indianapolis 500, the day before or the day after the big show. At least here with the service, you could compete in the other ones, but I think being in missing that out by just a slim margin in the qualifying and being in split 2 or 3, if you feel like you could have been in the top split, will hurt a lot more than somebody who wins the 10th split, right? If you're down a couple of rings on the ladder, you have a realistic expectation. But for all these guys, if you want to win at Indy 500, you want to do it in the feature. And that's why, Arjuna, you talked about all the stats pre-race. That's why the top split and the feature of them all, right? The one that we cover, the one that most of the major teams focus on, that's why it is basically its own statistical category, because it is the race of all the races that you can possibly participate in.
49 laps to go then here into that final quarter of the action. The 2020 iRacing Indy 500 has been relatively quiet. Lots of single file action, but it really is starting to fly on by, and only about 20 laps away then from cars down onto pit road for the final time in today's action. Justin, I think the interesting thing here, though, is we're going to wrap up the month of May and look forward to the full medal action that takes place in just 7 days' time. But the great thing at RaceSpot, we always have IndyCar action. Every Monday we have the iRacing IndyCar Open Championship. Got the Lionheart competitions, the Open Wheels 500, the ISOWC. There's just so much going on in American open wheel competition week in, week out.
Absolutely, and we talked about this a little bit with how tight-knit the community is here. These drivers put in tons of effort to be able to perform for that race on Monday night as well, to be able to show what they can do both on ovals and road courses. It's brought some great and exciting battles, and these drivers compete in many different series and leagues as well with one another. So it's incredible to see how tight-knit many of these competitors are and how some of the rivalries have built up over time.
Sometimes the IndyCar community gets a bit of a rap for being a bit toxic, but no, I don't think that's necessarily fair. There are, of course, 3 big organizations, Powerslide Motorsports, Team Talent, and the Apex Racing I5G Alliance, but talk to someone like Jesper Orman. We talked to him about this very topic in the month of November. If you have questions and you're willing to ask them in the right way to the right people, you will get all the insight that you need to learn about the IR18, build up your own setup knowledge and a development process, and go from there. And for someone like Orman, and now in the top 15, 13 positions gained on the day so far, definitely our biggest mover, chasing down the iRacing Rallycross World Champion in front of him. Just an indication that continued effort, continued progress gets you results here in the biggest race of them all. At the front, though, there's been some comments about how dominant, the teammates have been so far. And I mean, who's going to break the stranglehold here, Evan? Because if you're Wilson Nato, you've been quite quiet in the opening 150 laps here.
Yeah, and I've gone out of my spiel about how I think being quiet sometimes is better, but notice how he has started to tighten his grip just a little bit, right? Kraus there as well, within 2 seconds of the race leader, not that far behind either. So I think that, you got Zach Campbell to mix. Christopher DeBear, by the way, talked about his issues on the short run on the last restart. He's done a good job of holding strong in third, and maybe to the benefit of, again, that slow entry lap by Zach Campbell to benefit the one car. But it has very much been a 2-horse race in Treno and Costantini, but I still feel like you can't count out these drivers. I think all it would take to make this thing a race is for those other drivers to undercut by 1 lap. You undercut them by 1 lap, you probably go from about 1.4, 1.3 or 2 seconds off of the race lead to within a second. once you get within a second, you're in the draft. If you can perhaps split apart those drivers after they come down for pit road, you're on. But, I was questioning, were some of the drivers going to go for those moves on that last pit cycle we just saw? Demerit and Campbell actually did the opposite of what I would have expected. They went later. It'll be interesting to see if they do the same thing. I just personally don't think the overcut's the call to go for. I think you want to go for the undercut, get that quick couple tenths of a second and then fight them for it. But if we can stay green, then it is all going to come down to that final cycle of service. They're in range as is, but I still think the key is going to be you need to crack the top three, and Campbell, Nato, and Kraus all in a very good position to do so. To the point we made earlier, Arjuna, doesn't matter what happens in the first 199. That's not where the race ends. We also don't go racing for 201. So who cares if you're in P5 all night? If you're inside of the top 5 late, you have just as good an opportunity as anybody else.
43 laps to go, and it's going to come down to the wire, I would think. It's always good as well that, these events, it brings in new names, not just in terms of the competitors, but onto the drivers' cars as well. In the case of Wilson Neto, the Brazilian, got some comments from him that a couple of new sponsors jumping onto his machine after an impressive qualifying week. You've got Forum Off, a Brazilian gaming forum going all the way back to the 1990s, and Wilson said, back in the days when Quake World was the FPS of the moment. Just think about that if you're just as old as I am as well. Quake World. It's rather an old title. Another one that I thought was interesting was B2F Funilaria, the best and quickest car repair service in Sao Paulo City. So great to have some support of NATO here. And not just from his compatriots, but of course from his Powerslide Motorsports teammates as well. He's 1.5 seconds adrift, and heading into the final 40 laps at a track that he has been mastering in qualifying trim. Can he take the victory in the race as well? Let's check in with Johan Hart then, Evan, because he's been marauding his way back up the field, now in 14th, and has Austin Espety in front of him. He might still have a top 10 finish on the cards here today.
Yeah, I'm still a bit perplexed as to what the issue was, right? We discussed the possibilities of maybe top it off on field, didn't get it all the way full. It's important to note that, again, he was a top 5 car, and then on the first cycle of yellow flag pit service, came back in the lap following for additional service. The car did not go on the jack, so it's not like he accidentally forgot tires or something to that effect. He appeared to have a normal length pit stop the first time through, so I'm not sure that if he didn't get it full, it would have been by a big margin. But whatever the issue was, at that point, thought pretty comfortably that it was going to take him out of the battle for the race win. And he's been able to storm his way from the 20s up to position number 14. I still think maybe Espety, maybe Olsen within striking distance. Don't know if Harth is going to have enough time to get all the way back to a top 10. But if we talk about mistakes, and not all mistakes are weighted equally than others, and certainly know that this is going to be one that he's kicking himself over. But certainly a tip of the cap for this driver to stay in it, fight to the end, and still try to get a good result out of a race where without that additional trip down pit road, we could be talking about a very different fight for the race win up front.
And I mean, I'll quote Al Unser. I mean, for those who are maybe new to Indianapolis and are wondering what this race is all about, well, you just don't know what Indy is all about. Oh, that was an emotional interview, and I really love rewatching some of the clips of drivers exuberant and just so excited about taking a victory at such a historic race, one of the racing capitals of the world. And of course, a busy weekend of action, Evan. It's not just IndyCar qualifying this weekend. You've got usually, typically, when you have all 3 big competitions on the same day, you'll have the Monaco Grand Prix, the Coke 600, and the Indy 500 on the same day. Doesn't align this time around, so not going to be as hectic, but always just a nice celebration of global motorsport.
It is, and it's good to see this weekend as well. I think on the real-life calendar, one of the busiest race weekends that we have seen in quite some time, right? Of course, the schedules have been shuffled around just a little bit, and Monaco this race weekend as well, but you do have, all 3 of NASCAR's top series in competition. You do have full days of Indianapolis 500 practice and, of course, qualifying going on today, and more qualifying with the last row in the Fast 9 going on tomorrow. Still a long ways to beat back to 2019 times, but It really is, I think, inspirational and motivational to see so much racing on the calendar in real life, and of course here on the sim, where it never went away, and starting to see these calendars get back to normal, and so many races that were canceled or postponed or abandoned last year back in some form. Fun to see, and hopeful that we can continue positive trends to get ourselves back to a pre-2020 world, and we can all enjoy all the racing action that we are expected to see, and cheer on all our favorite drivers, and partake and watch at all of our favorite series that we've come to know and love. It's a little bit of a different month of May, but Arjuna, you can't take away the month of May entirely. It is back in some form this year.
And it's great. One step at a time. That's how I'm very much viewing it as we get this look across the start-finish line. It's a bit of a gap forming up now between, that's Alexis Newsom in 17th, and there's Joshua Chin. 6 seconds adrift now is the King of Chin, so some separation starting to form, and maybe some lap traffic going to start playing a bit of a factor. You mentioned, of course, NASCAR in action this weekend, not from the Charlotte Motor Speedway, Justin, but instead heading to the Lone Star State and the Circuit of the Americas for the very first time. I wonder if track limits are going to be somewhat similar to when IndyCar visited there back in 2019.
Well, they already explained, well, in areas like the S's, the track limits, you go more than that full car length across the rumble strips, essentially, you end up having to serve a drive-through penalty. But for a lot of the paved segments of the racetrack, Arjuna, they do have a lot of flexibility when it comes to the track limits. Drivers are taking that section, say, off towards the arena section, very wide for preparation for stock car racing at Circuit of the Americas. And keep in mind, Circuit of the Americas, already a lot of history. Just a few years old, but essentially the first purpose-built Formula One circuit in the United States. A lot of great passing opportunities at that racetrack. A lot of elevation changes. But also, it's not an easy track to run with at a stock car. So it brings that intrigue and excitement, I think, for fans. And keep in mind, weather could also be a factor with potential rain.
Oh, I forgot about that one. And of course, because we're on a road course, rain tires, very much the name of the game when it comes to those sort of conditions. Potential speculation about having some oval races under rain conditions as well. Tire development, always such an interesting topic to be thinking about. But now I'm focused, Evan, on pit stops. It's lap 34, so realistically, anyone could come down onto the lane next time around and make it to the end of this race.
And we've already seen drivers go 34 laps, maybe 35. I saw 34, certainly the highest number that I saw early in this race, and that time I was 33 laps to go. So we are in our window to the end. Well, these drivers have been out there for 28 laps. You got 33 to go. The pretty simple decision is basically wait 2 more laps and split it directly in half. But I still think if you're in NATO, Philip Kraus may have slipped back a little bit too far on this run. He's 2.8 seconds off. That's going to be a tall order to make up. So it may be a top 5 or a top 4 race. I just think the undercut's the way to go. Now, granted, if I knew these race strategies, I'd probably be on the pit box, call it a race for a top 10 instead of pretending I know what I'm talking about and speculating. So we'll see if that longer run, remember they waited about 3 laps longer than those top cars did the last time, if that continues to work for them. But I wouldn't let those race leaders get away from me that much. Wouldn't be shocked if pit stops are happening the next time around. Remember, there is no need to save for extra time. This race ends at lap number 200. No ifs, ands, or buts. So your race leaders stay out this time through. It's got to be happening in the next 1 or 2 laps.
So across the line they come. And of course, you never are thinking about trying to save fuel in the closing stages. In Indy, it's the opposite way. If you get a caution coming out, you want to burn the fuel, something that we've seen on occasions before. If I'm Olsen, I'm down onto pit road, and guess what? He's followed that call down exactly when I thought he would come down, so the Swede is one of the first cars into the lane. Most important stop of the race so far. Then there goes the King of Chins down on the box as well. Jesper Orman releases himself just in front. Nope, cycles behind Hugo Olsen, but 2 Swedish drivers then, Justin, will be formed up with one another. A draft on their side as they come back into traffic.
It appears your race leaders have also elected to duck down, so they are now in at 30 laps to go. So the window is wide open for pit stops here. It came close because Demerit thought about following them in, picked up the draft, and nearly hit the attenuator.
Here we go then. Race leaders into the box for the final time today. No such dramas for Costantini this time around. Looks like relatively simple for Treno as well. Down they go and away they roll. Final time of the race. The Apex Racing teammates out onto track. And you can see in the background of his shot, here comes Demerit, here comes Campbell, Nato, Bennett. Pit stops well and truly underway. I wonder here, Evan, who's going to be staying out there for one more lap?
And we saw somebody take out a cone. I wonder if that was Nato, who was way over to the left-hand side. He was about 76 miles an hour at the cone for pit road speed of 60. So Nato may have sped. I also saw Costantini. He was really hot down to pit road at about 73 miles an hour. He came from about 4 car lengths behind Treno to passing him. But apparently there's a lot of leeway in that first segment on pit road because there was no speeding penalty for Costantini, no speeding penalty for Nato. They come in 1 lap after the race leaders. Philip Kraus, all over the brakes, is down pit road this time. Also, Harrington, Kinsella, Lichtenberg, only Johan Hart and Andrew Wood will cycle out to the race lead. Pit stop's going to be done here awfully quickly. And Christopher Demerit has cycled through to the lead car, who has already pitted, leapfrogging Costantini and Treno. So he's officially made his move for the race win. You're watching a battle right now for 10th on the back. That will become the battle for the race lead. And here's the counter punch as Costantini going to go right back down on the inside.
Winner 7 days ago, Philip Kraus off of the pit road now. Should cycle in, I think, about 7 seconds adrift from the race leaders. It's Costantini back to the front with Demerit in second, and Treno on the hunt for his 3rd victory in a row, now settling for 3rd. 27 laps to go, and it all comes down, Justin, to this drag race to the Yard of Bricks.
And you have to give great credit to Demerit in this race because he's one of the best when it comes to executing on pit road today. He's picked up another couple seconds of the lane with the undercut. Now it's just a matter of the swap back and forth, and when you time it up, when to position yourself for the right moment and right time to make the move. And these drivers are going to get a little bit more aggressive as this run goes on.
On board with Zach Campbell, who represented Team RLL in the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup in 2021. Still in with a shout of it, but I think now it's very much a battle between Demerit, Costantini, and potentially Brandon Treno here. Because, Evan, if you have been the front 2 cars, we've seen those guys swapping back and forth. But that 3rd car, that 4th car in line, they struggle just that little bit too much with dirty air to really try and pull up side by side.
And that's why I think, I mentioned to go for the undercut to split these two. Well, some drivers listen to me, right? Campbell, Nato, and Demerit all undercut and pitted before Costantini and Brandon Treno did. So my mindset and my train of thought was right. They went for the undercut. I don't know if Campbell and Nato are going to be enough because they don't really gain anything in all of this, right? They're 5 and 6 now. That'll turn to 4th and 5th once Johan Harth pits from the race lead, and he is in this time. So these cars now will cycle back to the top of the board, but Demerit did it perfectly. He was primed for it, sitting 3rd, went for the undercut, split them up, and that's not to say that he's not going to fall back to 3rd at some point here, right? Right now getting passed by Costantini, and Treno going to look for the move, but once you get these two apart, now it's a free game. First off, at the start of the race, all the passing was more so strategic, right? To draft and to pull away. Demerit now going to do everything he can to make sure that those top 2 cars, Costantini and Treno, don't get to 1-2 again. So he's going to be pounding the pavement lap after lap. He's done his job. He hung out in 3rd, let them do the heavy lifting, and he executed beautifully on that final cycle of pit stops to put him in contention for another win in the iRacing Indy 500.
At the line, it's Costantini once more, though. I mean, now, though, for anyone else, it's almost game over, Justin. For Wilson Nato, he's 1.3 seconds adrift from the race lead, and he's going to really struggle, I would think, to try and get anything done at this point in time.
I think he's too far back right now to be able to get a chance to be able to draft on up. And as well, it doesn't help when the leaders are swap drafting You have some of the drivers who can get locked up. You also have our drivers trying to swap draft their way to get back up there. The teammates, Brophy and Harrington, trying to find a way to close on up. This is not going to be easy whatsoever for them to close up 5 seconds. So it's essentially down to what could be a 3-4 car race for the battle for the race lead. It's all down to the timing, how things fare. With the rest of these drivers, they're fighting for valuable positions in pride.
Just getting to the checkered flag of 500 miles of action here at Indianapolis, no matter what split you're in, is an accomplishment. And that's the thing I think that some people who are new to the iRacing service will not appreciate, Evan. It's that everyone who wins in Indianapolis, whether it be the first split, whether it be the 30th split, they are a victor. They can drink the milk. They can do everything that they want to claim. They have tasted victory here in Speedway, Indiana.
Yeah, and that's why, I talked about the difference between, how tight qualifying is, and maybe those guys in the second split will be left thinking what could have been. But if you're in the 10th split, it means just as much as winning here in the very top split of the iRacing Indy 500, because this is a race that is far more than your split or the drivers that you're racing against. There is no guarantee that you'll even make it the full 500 miles, right? When these long endurance races started, way back with the NASCAR days, with the Daytona 500, and NASCAR built the big super speedways. And back when this racetrack was a full 2.5-mile racetrack full of brick, it was the accomplishment in itself for the teams to engineer a race car that could survive to the end, let alone fight for the race win and hope to find yourself in victory lane in the hallowed grounds of IMS, right? So that still rings true today. Well, these cars are far more reliable, and on the sim, in fact, it is basically solely in the hands of the driver. The car's not going to quit on you. The main objective is always fighting and surviving the full 500-mile race, and look at that, maybe a little bit of miscommunication there. Treno thought about going to the inside on Costantini, didn't do it, but that was a late checkup. So that sync and that coordination that we saw out of those two early is out the window, and you're looking at a three-way battle for the race lead with Zach Campbell hoping he can join in, just out of the picture, 7/10 back and forth.
450 miles are done into the wall. Brandon Treno scrapes his outside set of tires, checks up his momentum, and I wonder if, with 50 miles left to go, Brandon Treno has dashed his chances at victory here today. You can get away, Justin, with a couple of those wall scrapes, but Brandon Treno will be hoping and praying he has not incurred any sort of damage.
Doesn't look like any damage visually on the car, but it could have been much worse. Any further up, and he would have potentially caused that side pod to go flying up. Turn 2 was a tricky spot in the fixed Indy 500, remember, where the aero wash led to several drivers pushing up into the wall. Treno that time seen that similar effect, and he nearly did the same thing coming off of turn 1 once more. It's going to be tricky in that short shoot for drivers with the aero wash, and he's trying to get back up close. It could take several laps to get back to the side swap.
I tell you what, we all get a mulligan. We all get a redo in our predictions here. It's coming down to these final 20 laps. Evan, let's start with you, because your winner, or your prediction rather, I think is still very much in the driver's seat here.
Yeah, and I don't think that damage is really going to hurt Treno much, but even if it's just the slightest, but even if it just plants a seed of doubt, right, in the mind of the driver of the Three Machine Treno, who's looking to become not only the, only 3-time winner, but how about doing it 3 years in a row? I mean, that's history on the line. Costantini trying to become the first winner from pole in history of this feature top split of the iRacing Indy 500. Part of me almost wants Christopher Demerit to get this run, right? By no means an underdog, because you mentioned he is the highest rated I-rated driver in this field, right, with a 7144 I rating. That's why he is car number 1, and therefore what you could consider, I guess, the number 1 seed in this race. I just love the race that Demerit's done. We talk so much about the coordination between Costantini and Treno and how well they work together. For Demerit to be able to hang back there, out of sight, out of mind, ride third, recover, and then execute on that last pit stop, I think it would be a fun story for the one car to kind of be the spoiler in all of this, but for the sake of history, I'm sticking with my call. I like how the 13's looking.
How about you, Justin? What are you thinking here?
I'm not sure what Treno right now in third position. It's going to take a lot of effort to try and take away second in the first place to get himself into this back and forth scenario. I'm liking Demerit, though. I will say that in terms of what he's been able to do in terms of the execution, so It's hard to say. I'm not quite sure in terms of what to think here, but if Treno can get himself up into this top 2, then I might be able to stick. I'm going to stick with Treno just in case. I'll say that.
I have no clue. All I know is my choice, Wilson Nato, is I think a little bit out of luck right now. He would need a 3-car disaster to also take out Zach Campbell somehow, who's slipping away from the front 3 cars right now, to bring the Brazilian back into the mix. It will be 15 laps to go at the line. And Justin, thinking back to the action 7 days ago in the fixed 500, if you're Christopher Demerit leading with 10 laps to go, you will be feeling supremely confident as they are 3 wide at the line. It's Brandon Treno to the inside and trying to get to the race lead. Costantini holds on, but here we go. 3 cars fighting for the milk here in Indiana.
And he wants to take away that second position because we've seen how effective you can be going back and forth if you are the driver in second. The tough part is when you're swap drafting, it really affects that driver third in line. We've seen it in the fixed race. We've been seeing it a lot of the open. I think Treno needs to maybe try and get to the outside. That's the tough part, but Constantini continues to drift up there to get clean air from himself and continues to hurt Treno's chances to try and poke his way around for second.
And you can tell right now there is no gamesmanship between the teammates. It is all on the line here. They all want the victory as Costantini once more fends off the challenge from Treno. Hip check to Christopher Demerit, who's up into the outside wall at turn 2 for the second time in 6 months. Caution flag is surely about to fly here as Christopher Demerit is tumbling his way down this back straightaway into the inside wall. And I think because of that, Evan, we will stay under green flag conditions.
And it goes back to the handling issues for Treno, right? That's the same spot on track where the 3 made that self-incident, right? That solo mistake to just get into the outside wall. And this time, Treno takes out Demerit. It's a kind of 3-wide move off and into the corner. It looked like he backed out of it, thought better of it, and then just squeezes Demerit into the wall. There was nowhere for Demerit to go. And then as that car sails back off into 2, the front end is destroyed. He limps it to the grass on the back straightaway. There is no caution. We stay green, and Demerit taken out late by Treno in a 3-wide battle for the lead in the center of 1 and 2.
We'll take one look at this super slow-mo static shot coming through the short chute and Treno just sliding up the track. Oh, that's going to be an interesting team debrief, but like I was saying, Justin, it was all on the line. All 3 of these guys were fighting wheel to wheel for the victory here today.
Yeah, that is a very, very tough break for Christopher Demerit. He played this race near perfectly, especially on the execution of the pit lane, and for that to be the reason he doesn't come away with the milk and with the checkered flag has to be highly disappointing. But this changed the complexion of this race because now Treno trying to now still fight for the lead. This now moves Zach Campbell into the conversation for the race win, though.
Still think Campbell is going to be on the outside looking in, but 12 laps to go. It will be 11 at the line here, and suddenly things are much more intense at the front. Still side by side, the 2 teammates as Costantini back into the lead of this race. Costantini and Treno had been at the front for so long, and I'm just a bit surprised, Evan, at that desperation from Treno to try and be a bit aggressive with still 15 laps to go, because he got lucky. That really could have brought out the caution for the 5th time today.
Really could have wrecked him, right? He could have just as easily had made that contact and got hooked around Christopher Demerit. Could have taken out all 3 of those race leaders. And you're right, I would have expected a little bit more patience from Treno there. I mentioned that little bit of doubt, and I wonder if that little bit of contact, remember that touch that he had with the wall, if that just flustered him a little bit, because that was the 2nd time in as many laps that Treno had forced a 3-1 into turn 1. Where honestly, I don't think it was necessary. Could have taken the one position, fought for the other one on the back straightaway, and you can see the way that they're going at it now. I mean, who would have thought that these guys were teammates? A lot of late dives. Constantini with a late dive that time at 1. I mean, it is very clear that the gloves are off here at Indianapolis. And if I'm Zach Campbell, I may not have speed to win this thing on my own right now, but these 2 up front may just take each other out the way they're going at it.
It's about timing the run, coming out of turn number 4, making sure you lift the throttle off early enough so you can slam back onto it before you even get to the apex of the corner and sling your momentum down that pit straightaway towards the yard of bricks. in that oh-so-important drag race to the line. 9 laps to go, and the top 5 cars separated by 1.7 seconds, with Jason Brophy 6 seconds adrift. So for Nato and Kraus, it is effectively watch on here, Justin, and see if Apex Racing comes to blows once more.
Yeah, I was following along with some of the close finishes the past couple of seasons. Treno is not afraid to try and be very defensive in these types of situations, especially side by side. Right now, we're not going to see those major pushes and squeezes. And a couple laps to go, likely see them. But Treno's in a good position. That's the main thing for the swap, because he gets that swap for the front straightaway to get the lead lap. Right now, that's the one main positive right now as he goes for the swap again.
It is coming down to the wire, and history is on the line here. Either way, it will be written. If Costantini can take victory, it will be the first time in 12 years. Pole position makes its way into victory lane here in Speedway, Indiana. If Treno holds on, immortality for Brandon Treno. 3 victories in a row at a race that no other driver has even won on multiple occasions. 7 laps to go, and there is tension in the air here. And Evan, I know we're commentators and maybe shouldn't be as invested as some team principals are, but I don't know about you. I have the Christian Horner foot tap going on pretty hardcore right now.
Well, this race, you talk about Brandon Treno looking for immortality. He's already got that as a race winner in this race, let alone the only ever multi-time race winner. But this race has not been kind to previous iRacing Indy 500 winners, right? Matt Pavelski with an issue. He's going to finish this race in 30th. Christopher DeMera just racked out no more than a dozen laps ago. He's going to finish in the 20s. Joshua Chin just never really had it all together. He's running in 19th. So all of those notable previous race winners in the field here tonight have not had a race like Brandon Treno has. And it has not been elegant in the last 25, but he may be the hardest working driver on track. Again, to the inside on Costantini, this time by 6 laps to go at Indianapolis. And with Campbell and Nato fading, it comes into focus that the 3 and the 13 who have been fighting all night long should be the 2 to fight it out amongst themselves.
Red versus yellow, they both started on the front row in a race that we thought qualifying would be important in, but Justin, it doesn't tell the entire story, I think, to say that the front row is still leading in this race. Dominance from the Apex Racing team, but a race where a number of drivers have climbed their way up through the field, and with 5 laps still to go, let's talk very quickly about some of those drivers, the likes of Andrew Kinsella, 9th on the day, 13 positions gained there. Or how about Jesper Orman? I was talking about for 3 Crowns Racing, what a past couple of months it's been for them as they build up their performance. 15 positions gained. He's sitting right now on the outside of the top 10 positions.
Those drivers have definitely had some impressive runs. Hugo Olsen, 12th position, has been able to strategize. Johan Harf has been an intriguing one where he was up at the front, but had something happen that shuffled him towards the back of the field, remember? So it's now to where several competitors have had some impressive days, but for the very front of the field, it's starting to get where they're trying to get aggressive. They're trying to start to snake around the straightaway. They don't want to swap draft anymore.
It's what we saw 12 months ago coming to the line in a white flag shootout. Still have 3 laps to go, but it's Treno in control. 7.5 miles left for iRacing Immortality. Costantini looks for the draft as well here. It is tense in the air, and I think for now, Treno might be in control, Evan, because Costantini is washing up the track coming through the short chute.
We talked about all that aggressive driving, and these tires are going to be about as worn as they've been all night, right? They pitted right on their number with about 30-ish laps to go, maybe 28, 29 for a lot of these drivers. So you're not going to have a ton of grip to work with. And for the most part, you don't have these drivers all night long going down to the grass, going to back up to the wall, trying to break that toe. Costantini now going to have to make the hardest pass he's made all night, and he's a little bit far away, I think, at about 0.3 of a second, looking to 2 laps to go.
5 miles left. My word, are we moments away from iRacing history being written once more in the 2021 iRacing Indy 500. It's an Apex Racing team 1, 2, and 3. The question is, who will come out on top here? And Justin, with Wilson Nato and Phil Krause in 4th and 5th, they've had a very quiet day, and they'll be watching for the fireworks in front.
Yeah, that 13 is getting very tight. He has clipped the rumble strips a couple times already, trying to close up for this final lap. I don't know if he's going to get close enough to be able to send it in for the inside or the outside.
Here we go, white flag in the air for the 2021 iRacing Indy 500. Trano leads by 3/10 across the yard of bricks. Down into turn 1, they will throw themselves. Costantini has been so tight, almost gets up into the wall once more, searching on that upper groove for whatever he can do to find some momentum. Down the back straightaway, the gap increases, 4/10, snaking back and forth. What's it going to be? Photo finishes the last couple of years might not be as close this time around. It's still 3/10. Brandon Trano, one corner away from iRacing immortality. Here he comes, the Apex Racing team, 1, 2, and 3, and it's the 3rd win in a row for Brandon Trano in the 2021 iRacing Indy 500. Across the yard of bricks, he comes, and he begins his celebration as well.
Worked so hard for that win. We talked about the battle between those two. They were cordial for much of the night, but when it came down to it, he was hungrier than everybody else, put himself into the wall, nearly took himself out of this race. Of course, the controversial touch with Demerit, he and his teammate going back and forth, and Brandon Trano makes the pass for the race win with about 4 laps to go. Costantini did everything he could to get it late, but just way too tight, and what a job for the number 3. He's 3-time in the iRacing Indy 500.
And I put the pressure on him in the build-up here. I said it would be outstanding if he did it. And 2 contrasting emotions. Brandon Trano, who I'm sure is absolutely delighted and over the moon. I'm watching Michele Costantini right now. Heartbreak for the pole position sitter. We're not going to show you that face right now, but Justin, so much hard work has come into this event. And for someone like Costantini, oh so close in November to doing it as well, he is heartbroken to come this close once more in Speedway, Indiana.
And in those final laps, with how hard he was pushing, you can tell he wanted this as much as possible. He wanted to be in position to be able to hold on and get the race victory. He'd been in position for the race victory all day for 500 miles just about. But in the end, just could not have enough to be able to keep up with Trano for the final couple laps, as some of the various members, their alliance, watch along as the celebration begins.
Trano continues to burn the house down. He's got a bit of practice here at doing some donuts in, well, the most historic venues of them all. And I'm sure for the Apex Racing team, there will be some consternation and some debriefing that needs to go on after that race. But at the same time, I'm sure the celebrations will begin here in Speedway, Indiana. Let's go ahead then and take a look at our race results for the 2021 iRacing Indy 500. What a day it was. Brandon Trano into iRacing immortality with his 3rd victory in a row in Speedway, Indiana. Costantini so close, and heartbreak for the 13 car. Just 3/10 separates the front row on the grid. Zach Campbell, he'll be slightly disappointed, I'm sure, to finish on the outside of the podium positions. 3rd place for him. But Wilson Nato, Phil Krause, no real chances for them. They settle for 4th and 5th on the day. Connor Harrington will be delighted to get a top 6 finish in his first appearance in a top split Indy 500. Finishes in front of his teammate Jason Brophy in 7th, with Henry Bennett for Powerslide Motorsports finishing in 8th, just in front of his teammate Andrew Kinsella. One of the hardest charges, 13 positions gained for the Canadian in 9th. The Hyperstar Brendan Lichtenberg rounds out the top 10 in an interesting day for I5G with Apex Racing team. Johan Hoff, the iRacing Rallycross World Champion, rebounding to finish in 11th position. Hugo Olsen, winner in November, has to settle for 12th here today, with fellow compatriot Jesper Orman in 13th. Great to see 3 Crowns Racing and the Indy Alliance program doing so well here in the Brickyard. Andrew Wood across the line in 14th with Liam Quinn, Andreas Ake, and Chad Simpson, Adam Crane, and James Walker all finishing on the lead lap. A late race disappointment for the likes of Alexis Newsom. Very strong in today's activity. She'll finish on the outside of the top 20 with Joshua Chin and Frank Levick also one lap down. Christopher Demerit, Austin Espety, and Riley Thompson begin the list of retirements not making it to the checkered flag, with AJ Burton, Tanner Watkins, and Yao Valverde all being mixed up in some action just about halfway through the race. Christian Steele, Matt Pavelski also not making it through. They round out the top 30 positions with Rodrigo Franzoni, Plino Ferreira for the EG Racing team not getting out of the opening 80 laps, and Jacob Oster, what a day it was for him, qualifying for his first ever iRacing Indy 500, unfortunately came to an end in the early stages of the race. We are going to step aside for just a quick moment here live on RaceSpotTV. Don't go anywhere. Post-race coverage here from Speedway, Indiana continues right after this. Let's get green flag racing underway here.
Catching Valtteri Lander around the outside though.
He avoid the wall. No, he doesn't.
Oh, we've got carnage again. Carnage again. Oh, no front wing on a part of it. Oh, focus back on Adam Blocker as there's contact.
Welcome back to RaceSpotTV and post-race coverage of the 2021 iRacing Indy 500. What a day here as the month of May comes to a close from the virtual IMS. All eyes now on the real world and the 105th running of the Indianapolis 500. My name is Arjuna Kankipati, delighted to have been joined by Evan Pasoko and Justin Prince for today's coverage. TV cameras brought to us by Istvan Ballo and TrackCams22.com with additional car cameras designed by RaceSpot's own Tyler Maxson. Let's dive straight into the post-race show, but before we get to the interviews, we are still waiting for Brandon Traino to dial us up here in the RaceSpotTV booth. Let's get some thoughts from my co-commentators. Evan, for you, I mean, usually you commentate on, the big stock cars racing around the ovals of America. This was a slightly different type of a race, and what a race we got to witness.
I've seen a lot of stock car races on the service here at Indianapolis. I've actually probably driven more IndyCar races than called them, but just a great show tonight. Of course, we questioned what the flow of this race was going to be like, right? Where were the yellows going to fly? Where were drivers going to come through the field? And how was that going to affect strategy? And there was a couple of challenges thrown at Traino, thrown at Constantini, but at the end of the day, they were able to dominate 1-2. And it comes down to those two fighting at the end. There were some valiant efforts. We had a couple of drivers up 13, up 15 spots. But at the end of the day, I don't think that it was solely the track position that gave the 3 and the 13 the crack at the win there at the end. They worked hard all night, had a game plan, and got what they wanted, which was a fight between the two of them for the win here in Indianapolis.
Well, I think he's standing by now. The 3-time Indy 500 winner, Brandon Traino. Do we have a copy with you first up?
Yeah, guys, what's going on?
Brandon, conflicting emotions, I'm sure, for you there. First, the contact with your teammate in the closing stages, and then the drag race to the line. I mean, just talk to us about what you're feeling right now. You are well and truly at iRacing you are well and truly into iRacing immortality.
Yeah, it's bittersweet, man. It really is. It's hard to celebrate when you have contact with your teammate. I don't know. I feel like I was a little bit aggressive, but I needed to be. I mean, all race long, P3 can't do anything in the draft if the leaders are swapping. There was a little bit of net code, and Chris has no hard feelings, but it's hard to celebrate. But on the other end, it's amazing to have 3 in a row and to have such a good team backing me. We absolutely dominated this race once again, and I'm just really proud of the guys that are on I5G and Apex Racing Team.
Talk to us about the team effort here, Brandon, because qualifying dominant 1, 2, 3, and 4. The race not necessarily as smooth, but if Johan hadn't had whatever trouble he had early in the race, you never know. You guys could have been potentially looking at locking out the top 5 results. What does it feel like for you guys every time you show up here in the month of May? There is full focus on this event to have so many of your drivers get the results they earned.
Yeah, we put a lot of emphasis on this race. I think it's definitely on our calendar every single year, and we put in so much time. We spent a lot of time this year focusing on getting the car really stable in traffic, especially behind multiple cars, just to be able to try to make runs at the end of the stints when you're mired back in traffic. So yeah, just shout out to those guys, man. We've just really had something every time we come to Indy, and it's pretty special.
What's the future hold now, Brandon? Because, I mean, I guess you now look forward to coming back here in 2022 and trying to do it all over again. And I won't be the one putting the pressure on you next time. I promise you that, because I think well and truly 3 in a row, it's something that is going to take years, decades even, for someone to try and best.
Yeah, it's been funny. I was actually more nervous for this race than I think I've been the past 2 years that I won. Yeah, we've had a good car every time we come here, and it's easy when you have such good teammates. So again, just kudos to those guys. They've been, my rock this whole entire time. So kudos to those guys.
Well, you seem a little bit down, Brandon. I'm sure that there's going to be a little bit of disappointment in that contact with Chris. Go off and I guess start celebrating a bit, and hopefully the next time I speak to you there'll be a little bit more excitement about what you've just accomplished. Congratulations back to back to back here in Speedway, Indiana.
Yeah, thanks guys.
So that was Brandon Traino, and I tell you what, let's straight away drag in his teammate Michele Costantini here. Michele, do we have a copy with you first?
Yep.
Michele, pole position there. I mean, started off the race from the perfect position, but a race that pole position has actually never won before. It was so close at the end. I mean, what more do you think you needed to do to try and hold off your teammate there?
Probably some more fuel, considering that I was saving fuel while I was swapping with Chris, and then I still had to save a little bit more until with 5 to go. And the lap I switched back to map 1. Brandon got past and started actually defending from that exact lap that I went on map 1. So that was quite unfortunate timing. If I went on map 1 in a lap earlier, probably could have been back ahead of him, and I could have started mirror driving instead, and that could have been the difference. But yeah, P2, 1, 2, 3 for the team, so pretty happy about that. But yeah, I'm not happy with myself because I know I could have won that race if I played it a bit smarter.
Well, I had your webcam view up at the conclusion there, Michele, and I just saw the raw emotion from you there. I mean, can you explain to people, I mean, Alonso's line, you just don't understand what Indy is, I think, really this year.
I'm actually not quite sure. It really depends on what iRacing throws at us. But yeah, I'm open to basically everything that iRacing is going to announce. And yeah, other than that, just special events as usual. Yeah, that's about it, really.
Well, congratulations and apologies, Michele. So close yet so far. Looking forward to seeing you back in action then in 12 months' time once more in the month of May.
Thank you.
So Michele Costantini, second then for the Apex Racing train. Let's bring in Zach Campbell represented Team RLL in the 2021 Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup. And Zach, when we talked last night on the qualifying show, you said victory here today would mean more to you than a victory in the World Championship. Not able to get the victory here today, but you'll still be pretty happy, I would say, with a podium position.
Yeah, I mean, I think Michele and Treno were just leaps and bounds above where I was. So was Chris. I just made a couple little mistakes that just kind of cost me a shot there. I didn't feel comfortable behind more than 3 cars really, and so it just kind of wasn't meant to be. I'm slightly bummed, but I'm also really happy to bring home a 1-2-3 for the team, and you know, have a good day like this.
Can you explain? I've been trying to get someone to explain it, Zach, and I think you probably are one of the few people that can do this for me. Al Unser, he famously said, "You just don't understand what Indy means." Can you explain to those watching here in the post-race show what this means to someone who has grown up idolizing this race in particular?
It, especially on the sim, means a lot because, you know, a lot of people don't get the opportunities to run in real life. And so this is the most competitive form of you know, open wheel oval racing on iRacing, and so it means so much. It's so much dedication, and it's the greatest sim race in the world as well. So it's the honor of winning. It's got the most history of any event on the iRacing service, and it means a lot. And so it can definitely make you really, really happy, but it can also make you really, really sad. So yeah, I it's so hard to, you know, convey to someone until they do it, until they put in the work, put in really all the effort to kind of know what it takes and know, just experience all of everything that Indy is.
I think you put it quite well there. Zach, before we let you go, plans for the rest of this year. I mean, I think Michele kind of alluded to it. Potentially a second World Championship emerging in the Dallara IR01, but of course still question marks there. Kevin Ellis Jr., your teammate for Team RLL, has already indicated he might be pursuing some rallycross activities in the second part of the year. What does the second half of the year look like for you down there in Georgia?
I'm going to go lie on a beach somewhere. And just take a break, honestly. So we have ISOWC, obviously. Fantastic series in that. And then, I don't know after that. I mean, obviously there are questions over IR01, and I'd love to run it if it comes about. But really and truly, I just, you know, if it doesn't come about, I'm not too bothered. I've been on it for 5 months, and then we got school later in the year. So who knows? You know, maybe I'll try my hand at something that comes up. But as of right now, it's pretty open, and it's the first time I've been open all year, so I'm really, really happy about that.
Congratulations, Zach. I mean, what a year it's been for you so far, and hopefully this momentum continues over the second half of the year.
Yeah, I really hope so. I got to win something one of these times. I'm always second or third. So we got to just get a couple more spots there, and yeah.
That was Zach Campbell, third in the Apex Racing team train. And I tell you what, let's not just monopolize this post-race show with Apex Racing teammates. Let's bring in first Christopher Demerit, part of Team I5G, obviously an alliance with the Apex Racing team, but unfortunate contact there between Demerit and the eventual race winner, Brandon Treno, in the closing stages of that race. Chris, delighted you're joining us here in the RaceSpotTV booth, and just talk us through what happened in your perspective there.
Yeah, I mean, so at the beginning, I knew it was just trying to get through traffic little by little. I've been probably too aggressive sometimes in trying to get up, so I was a little more cautious this time and trying to focus on jumping on pit stops more than anything else. I was running fourth behind Zach, Michele, and Treno for most of it, just kind of saving fuel, trying to basically build an advantage for the last stop, which ended up working out. And then it was the 3 of us, and yeah, I just got there was just space between Treno and I, and there was just prediction code. I mean, Treno did nothing wrong, and he left tons of space, so just kind of unfortunate and unlucky. But I mean, Treno does a fantastic job each year, and he definitely deserves a third Indy 500 win.
If you don't mind me asking this, Chris, how are you going to try and cheer Brandon up? Because to be completely honest, he did not sound like a man who had just won his third consecutive Indy 500 when we talked to him just a few minutes ago. It was a much more down and dejected face, and I think the kind of tone that you'd hear from someone who just made contact with a teammate and was not necessarily feeling too thrilled about this. How do you guys move on then from that little bit of a tussle you had?
I mean, he did nothing wrong, so in my mind, he got it fair and square there. I mean, there's nothing he did that was wrong. I just got unlucky. So, no, I've already congratulated a few times. And once I saw what happened, I was just mad at the fact that we're you know, competing against the speed of light with network. So, no, he did a fantastic job all year, like always. He's definitely great. He was there at the end, so hats off to him.
I think you'll appreciate those kind words as well. Unfortunate there in the end to your race, Chris, but hopefully we'll see you back in action in 12 months' time once more in the iRacing month of May.
Yep, I plan to be there.
So that was Christopher Demerit. Heartbreak for him. He will finish today's action in the 23rd position, and I tell you what, one more interview to get to, and his first time in a top split iRacing Indy 500 for Connor Harrington of the private label Team Hype Machine. I'm sure you're pretty thrilled with a 6th place finish there, Connor.
Yeah, a really good race. I have to first thank Team Talent for bringing me in this year. Car was really stable throughout the entire 200 laps. A little bit of a bummer that, you know, some of the yellows didn't fall the right way, where we could have made an interesting play for strategy and maybe try to break up the I5G group. But as a first attempt in the top split 500, it's hard to be upset with P6.
And for someone who's making your first appearance then in this open setup competition, Connor, kind of give a bit of an indication to those who are new maybe to Indianapolis and this type of racing on the iRacing service, what it meant to now have to deal with open setups. You've got victories in the Lionheart IndyCar Series, a fixed setup competition, but this is a totally different behemoth where you can actually make those slight adjustments to tailor the car to your specific needs.
Yeah, you know, I think the one thing that we tried making a couple of adjustments in the pit stop, and it kind of helped us. It kind of helped us to take off a little better, but you know, it's so hard. You know, I mean, the track, you know, the static weather and the track temp just makes it really hard to make any sort of inroads on anybody. So, you know, I mean, it was, but it was a really good challenge. It was a very long race, a very stressful race, white knuckling it for 200 laps. But, you know, it's a great feeling to finish 6th in my first attempt.
And after being on holiday this past week, only a couple of days at that qualifying grind as well, I'm sure you're pretty relieved that those plans didn't interfere with this racing action on Saturday. Congratulations, Connor, and looking forward to seeing you back in action in Lionheart IndyCar competition in just a couple of weeks' time.
Yep, we'll see you guys. Thank you guys very much.
So that's Connor Harrington, and that will round out our post-race interviews. Before we say goodbye, though, I think we really need a bit of a debrief here, and I'll start with you, Justin Prince. You were on hand 7 days ago for the 2nd annual iRacing Fix 500. We thought there might be some analogies between the two races, and while I think single file action was the one thing you could take, what a different race we were treated to here today.
Yeah, lots of intrigue, lots of strategy calls for some, but in the end, what domination by one organization that put in a ton of work. Their focus had been for this race. As talked about, Trano had mentioned, they had spent the most time on the setup than in years past, and it showed for the speed. That entire alliance led just about every single lap in terms of domination. It was incredible to see, to say the very least, that speed and performance, and see some of the drivers who in some cases were able to claw their way into the top 10.
And from you, Evan, I mean, this type of domination is not something that I think we're necessarily going to be thinking about in 12 months' time, because a new tire model, I think, has opened up the possibilities. It's just opened up some new approaches that different teams have been able to find. In 12 months' time, when we return, there would have been several significant 500-mile races here at the Brickyard. None as significant, of course, as this iRacing Indy 500, but setup development, will have played its part, and by the time we return in 2022, who knows who will be at the top of the timing sheets.
It's easy to fall into this trap, right? The fact that we've had now the same race winner in the last 3 iRacing Indy 500s is pretty incredible. But remember, before that, we went so many years where we never saw that, right? Over the course of the first 9 installments of this, we got 9 different race winners. So what we're living through right now is the anomaly. Brandon Traino is the anomaly. He will not win every single 500. He'll try for the rest of his sim racing career. The stats are against him. So appreciate the moment and recognize the history that we're currently living in with this current age of domination, but know that it will not always be here. That tide always turns, Virginia. So much fun being a part of the broadcast with you this year, and looking forward to watching in 2022.
Very glad that on late notice both Justin and Evan joined myself, because otherwise it would have been a very lonely about 3 and a bit couple of hours. But it's time to say goodbye from Speedway Indiana and for the virtual month of May. As we mentioned on a number of occasions throughout today's broadcast, lots more American open wheel competition live on RaceSpotTV, so make sure you follow us for all of your sim racing action across of YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, and Instagram. If you're not already subscribed to us on YouTube, should hit that red button and the bell next to it to get notified every single time we go live with a great sim racing series that we get to cover. What an exciting couple of weeks we had. 7 days ago, the iRacing Fixed 500 kicked off the festivities as 33 drivers were left with equal shots, equal chances, and destiny in their hands. It was Phil Krause taking that victory, but here today, 7 days later, Brandon Traino has written himself into the iRacing history books. The action from IMS continues in Full Metal Motorsports tomorrow, as we'll know the 33 cars that will qualify for the 105th running of the Indianapolis 500 presented by Gamebridge. All that action will be live on NBC, but all the coverage of the iRacing month of May has been live on RaceSpotTV. My name is Arjuna Kankipati, and I've been joined today by the wonderful Evan Pasoko and Justin Prince. TV cameras provided to us by Istvan Ballo and TrackCams22.com, with additional car cameras designed by RaceSpot's own Tyler Maxson. We will be back in 12 months' time for more action here from Speedway Indiana. But for now, it's the Apex Racing team celebrating in victory lane. Brandon Traino, 3 times a winner here in Speedway Indiana, and he is well and truly immortalized in the iRacing history books. Racing underway here.
He's catching Valtteri Lander around the outside though.
He avoid the wall. No, he doesn't.
Oh, we've got carnage again. Carnage again. Oh, no front wing on the part of it. Oh, focus back on Adam Blocker as there's contact.